Oh, test le. Lo san la. Ti canta come sei?
Papa conjo sula ja celo tige dage topa chande dege poka jangon pumbori la gelon ge don chempo da janjo sembe ge don chempo da taje dojo de ze chande de samo na wa she jowe nanga de tinge zina nyopa shu so yang jen Jancho sempa sempa chempo papa chere se wancho shira ke paro to chepa samo chopa nila namba taj pumpo gapo te da la ya rashinge tumba namba ta ho dene sange ge to tseda tempa share bo Jancho sempa sempa chempo papa chere se wancho la dike chemes Rege boa rege momba gala la shira ke paro to chepa samo chepa jopa dopa de jita la barja deke cheme pada janjo sempa sempa chempo papa chere se wancho seda tempa share bola dike cheme so share bo rege bomo gala la shira ke paro to chepa samo chepa chocho Pachopa de Titana Patawar Jate Pupo Kapo de Dakya Rashingi Tumpa Namba Yanda Parje Sota So Tumpa Wo Tumpa Nye So Sule Tumpa Nye Shemaye Tumpa Nye Reki Kyansu Shemaye Deshin Dot Sorvada Dujeda Dujeda Namba Shepa Nanto Pao Shari Bode Tara Chotanje Tumpa Nye De Senyi me pa ma kya pa ma ka pa dima me pa dima dandewa diwa me pa gawa me pa ku shari bodhe ta wen tomba ni la su me surwa me tuje na me nambar she pa me mi me na wa me na me che me nu me hi me su me dra me di me ro re ja me cho me do mi ke ka me pa ne ige Kame ige no ba shepe kange bado yame do mari pa se pa me pa ne kashi sepe bardo yame deshe do do ge wada ko chupa da ko pada la me yeshe me to ba me ma to ba yame do Shari Bodhe Tavena Janjo Sempana La Toba Mepe Chir Shiraki Baru Tu Che Palate Chinete Selati Pame Cheta Pame Do Chinchi Lone Shito Nene Yangele De Beta Chindo Dozu Do Nampa Shupe Sangye Tanche Kya Shiraki Baru Tu Che Palaten Lana Me Bayanda Parto Pe Janjo Tungo Bazo Sangye So Teta Vena Shiraki Baru Tu Che Benga, Ripo Chembonga, Lana me benga, Minya Badanya benga, Dunge Tangera to Shiva Chepenga, Mizun Bena de Basha de Cheraki Baro to Chepenga, Meba Tayata Gate para Sangate Body so. Sharebo Chanjo Sempa Chimpo de Da Shiraki Baro to Chipa Samola La Paraja. Tiene chonde dege dinge zinde le chante chanjo sempa chimpo papa chere si wanchola leso les sheja wajine leso rik ude de shino rigu ude de shinte chita kyo kya deba de shindum Shirake paro to chepa samola chepa jat deshe chepa nangya che so hirango chonde dege dege te ka zene te da diampa share bo chanjo sempa chempo papa chere zawa chora tanje da debe ko la da mi da la ma hira disa jebe jite hirande chonde dege sompa lango pato do kala chope ne choda pa de ko che su po dai tu to che tu pa po la ma e pu she eso ka do so la ja tse lo aka samara cha sadara samara ya peta ka samara sadara Amaraja Sadara Samaraya Betaya Gate Gate para Sangate Bodi Soha Papa Kunchusungi Dangete Bedogerache Dova Muche Meba Goje Shiva Jishida Geba Jemi Tunge Jaringa Patanje Shande Goro Ye So Geri Tonda Gajushiwada Mitono Begeda Dewada Toba Buje to Pusuzo Biope Tashi de Gade Delation.
아게 최세기에 소하는 게 놀라편제 상계 로바라 다시 벽이
조심해 도다 리라린 신이데 김바디 상계 신도 메데와게 조근한다 신야 저바라쇼 이에다 구로다 나만다라 그야다야미
뭐야 다 참말이야 시즌은 참말아 아니 잠기때 아이
First of all, Dashi Dele to everybody who's here today. So we'll carry on from where we left off yesterday.
그래서는 니중께에 탑텔이야 세대 낭시엔도야다 심해 낭시엔도야세 니 여버체 다디 어다 딩이고 그래서는 계속 싫어래 아니 세대 낭시엔도야라야 아니 베게 그래서다 대조 하장이 하고 랑 대조 리딘 니는디 이니 그래 된침보 랑기다 개와 치마 편지 전다스 그래 땡게 되버도 어 된데 전다 침보 여봐 어 대단 안 되네 Where we
left off yesterday is we were talking about the method for generating renunciation, and that has two parts to it. There is overcoming attachment to the appearances of this life, and then overcoming attachment to the appearances of future lives. And so for that first one, that involves thinking about how these freedoms and richnesses, freedom, richnesses, this precious human rebirth is very difficult to get. And then once you have it, it's something that you can do so much with. And particularly what this means is you can use it to achieve a good future life after this one. And then also you can use it for achieving lasting happiness. And also thinking about how this life that we have right now doesn't last for long. It's very important. No.
Any chima penje nang xian do ya sa di len de mi lu kwa be dong yin nang yang yang sam na chi me nang xian do da ke san do cha de wo de di de chi me nang xian do ya.
And then for overcoming attachment to the appearances of future lives, what it says here is actions and their effects are unbetraying, by thinking over and over again about that and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence. That's how you do it. And of course, this is something that we already talked about yesterday. No.
Adi 그래서나 신대선 킹거와 신대리야 아니 뭐네 타내기 아니 베더야 그 접송체네 베 드네 베 로망고 베 로동다망고 대야가서 체제 신대지고를 셴네 아니 자두 랑링이 좀 다가랑시 랑제바제니 디디스 나와 케야 텔이야 어찌된 낭시에서 어디 뒤인데 뭐에 내주 여마르와 어디 반도야지
It's true. No, so this is true. You know, this life we make preparations as if we are going to live for hundreds of years, maybe even 1,000 years, and so we spend our time fighting against, trying to, vanquish our enemies, and trying to, we put so much energy into taking care of our friends. Everything is consumed with self-cherishing, even though really this kind of way of thinking is completely mistaken. No.
That's chime nangshedos. That's deleta gyurung gu deg mari di dele nangshemen che chima. Ani bige oda te de bari stomneta. Yana mi be ombo chambutinde. Otom jo chambe tidish ge gebina. Tin de sare sambache. O tin de ge bige deba chajorwa. Oda tisere nangshe de bige shenja chati. Oda tin bo bes.
And we might think to ourselves, well, it's true, this life doesn't last for long, but if I think about my next life, it would be very good if I could make sure that I become somebody very rich, very powerful. So we really want to have such a life. So this is also something we need to overcome. No.
Oh yeah, what is it? That's it. Oh, that is 가소래. 다 딩인 도네 가려서나 뭐에 니즈 아니 콜베나나 강에 가제도 콜바싱이디 아니 뭐네 타네기 다 콜바 동이 자주셔 동이게 나게 여다 매디 배 샤바체니 샤바체니 뭐네 타네기 콜베 견 시에니 아니 딜라 탄도 있고 탄도지 가와 타고서 탄도 있게니 니중스다 니주 좀 많이 비게면이나 and 타와 동이 로스 디네 안 비게 올 남로 슈도 이게 가르다 팅메이나 팅메람다 아니 전주 심세이나 티진 남체 어디 럼슈 관사 찬.
Then if we think about the different problems that we have in as long as we're in cyclic existence, if we really check up very carefully, we'll see all of the faults of cyclic existence and we'll want to be free of it. So once we have renunciation, which once we have renunciation, really genuine renunciation, then naturally we'll want to be free of cyclic existence. We want to achieve liberation from cyclic existence. And when we have that mind, in terms of the Hinayana path especially, then at that point, when you have that genuine wish to be free of cyclic existence, then you've actually entered into the path. And even with the Mahayana path, you've really entered into the path. No.
Oh yeah. Jazan da ngarazo khorbasati. Ani kharesana. Kishi para macheba. Kishi para macheba cheje khanda kishi para machebe. Ani o nyelengo phumbu dilleni. Oda delaya khorbasi. Khorbache.
As for what the cyclic existence is, Korwa in Tibetan, cyclic existence is, it means continuously, without interruption, taking aggregates, passing from, going from birth to death, taking new aggregates, life after life. No.
아딜레 광계도 소리, 코바도 광계 소리스나 오다 델레네베 칸사, 코바베 심진 오다 디 칸사, 다 미나 미소소 오소소 코디요.
And then as for who is circling, so when we talk about korwa, it's got the idea of a circle going around. So who is it that's circling? That's would be sentient beings, ourselves. That means in our case, human beings. We are at the moment we are the ones who are circling. No.
아디니 아디 컨데스 코브레 가려wan 코레스나 아니 오 레다 뇨모니 레다 뇨모왕 코레스 레다 뇨모니.
And then what is it that makes us circle? So the answer to that is karma and the klesha, or in other words, actions and the mental afflictions. Those are what make us continuously circle. No.
le nyomong ta di karesana koba koya zo yudi karesana lex le koba ke le sa ta koba ya du karike ge 있는 koba na ke s le가 지하 줘봐 어디 koba ke le sa 중이 koba ke le karesana 아니 nyomong 당진 왕기 머리가 왕기 뭐 있는 지 미시가 왕기 네 두자 사버렸어.
And so the main cause that makes us wander in cyclic existence, keep revolving in cyclic existence is karma, whether it's good karma or bad karma. In other words, when we say karma, it means performing actions, right? So it's the actions that we do, whether they're positive or negative. And then what makes us create the karma is the mental afflictions, especially ignorance, which means not knowing really how things are. No.
Oh yeah. Oda di ye karesana. Koba kyage nyomo de dangzi di zo karesana. Ngui nezu ani never sinde loti dangzi singi de lo chinje lo de. Di simba nangsin da de yore be sin de yore sin yo ma le. Karesana da sa de dende ba. Dende yin pa ma go che any task to be linging one a turning go mevich. What in this sim del Zin Deng Semtela and Tanzis Lochinchilo Loxie.
And so mainly what makes us keep wandering in cyclic existence is self-grasping. And so this is a completely mistaken mind. Is completely wrong, because it grasps at the existence of a self that exists from its own side, but actually there is no self that exists from its own side, because when we talk about the self, then that's actually something which is a dependent arising. Nevertheless, the way it appears to us is as if it exists from its own side. So it has that very vivid appearance of existing from its own side as something which is completely unchangeable. No.
Oh yeah. 그래서는 어디 당진디 왕기 다 시도 좀봐 시우지 자신부 진. 아니 그래서는 디 왕기 레서 그래서는 내 된다려야 아니 시행을 비게 남매단 시행 야바도 그래서 랑 코네시도 오, 딱 그래서 랑 코너 때와 요야 체도 애니 시에는 비게 내가 체야. 너심차. 오, 다 근데 망고 줘라 봐. 근데 뒤져라. 나 배조 친구 중선 배조 tun다라야. 된저 저거 망고 치고야. 다가난 신 가서 오래다. 터발라. 랑에 터 차도 체야. 아니 냠발은 된심. 아니 마오유나 될 통중 지나 토마다 개요 말이 있네고. So this,
because of this self-grasping mind, this mind grasping at a self that exists from its own side, then we think of ourselves as being, we think of that self as being so important. In order to get things for ourselves, then we're totally willing, completely willing to trample over others, to neglect others. Just to get things for ourselves, we're willing to harm others. We do all sorts of negative actions, for example, to acquire wealth. We do all sorts of, we feel jealousy towards those who we see as superior to ourselves, who are relatively superior to ourselves. Those who we perceive as our equals, then we're competitive towards them. And those who we see as lower than ourselves, we despise and we put down and so on. And in this way, we do so many bad things. No.
Oh yeah, what is it? That kanda ani bige 랑 코네 체도 ani bige 랑 토바도 안 시안 타도 체야. 오 베게 가르선다 타도치야 다가나시 토바 남도 첸 그저 거리 얘네면은 랑게 남도 없이 쇠네 아니 begin 된다. 아니 오다 비게 시험내봐 시야죠. 알아봐. 오늘 something this 기요. 하거든 게 랑게 베디 베 랑게 치에도 시에나 다 등산이는 먹두사 연구도 개거 핀즈 먹두 자고 하래. 랑 진진히 내 시에도 아니 어딘데 먹두셔야. 채사 개거 핀즈 먹두셔야. 총사 아니 딱 간다. 진산지가 나리네 써봐쳐야. 베디데 연구도 잠들셔야 돼서 또 된다 가도 그랬으나 다 진진 뒤통 다 진진 가려서나 다 아싸 티베 리닌진 내치도 오도지도 도전.
And so just thinking of ourselves, we engage in so many negative actions just to get things for ourselves, just thinking of ourselves. Our own, somehow our own negative conceptualizing mind, superstitious mind, sees others as superior to ourselves, and we feel jealous of them, and then others we have this mind thinking, oh, that they're the same level of us, and we feel competitive towards them and so on. And then if you think about it, these days you see so much war and unrest, and if you think about it, why is all that happening? It's all happening because of the self-cherishing mind, and because of that self-cherishing mind thinking I'm the most important. For that reason, we're willing to invade other countries, go to war against other countries, and so forth. So this is all because of that mind, which has this very strong sense of an I that exists in and of itself, from its own side. No.
어디서 딱 간다. 레산 과바장장 아니 뭐이 니즈 삼단다 과바를 깨와네 깨바 다다보도 되게 되와 뭐이 니즈 삼단나 배셔버 놔야 돼. 과바를 깨고 강에 동이 망고 송다. 에레 다가는 신 단다 미르된 체제 과바 나그 딱 이게 뭔들 약을 봐. 단다 약을이 단다랑 되게 깨바셔나 깔려 가지. 뭐네 단에 류그 터네 잖아. 류를 나자. 오, 근데 이게 나자 엔테니 약게 거 차오. 강에 딱 간다 서동 터는 강에 어딘데 망고 열어 봐. 류 터네. 생고 터네 잖아. 아니 가서 그래. 랑 데바 백sem 데바 나시 가져 재는 뭐니. 만데바 티게 강가 터터. 어딘데 땡이야. 다가는 신 아니 가서 그래. sem야 아니 되게 녀모고 돈이 배 뭐기 붙여져 배 뭐네 타네 sem충 오다 여자시나 때문에 타도 녀몽에 돈이 뭐기 돈이 망고 열어 봐 어디서 삼당 거
And so under the control of those mental afflictions, we create karma, and because of that we have to take birth in cyclic existence. And this is how it's been since beginning this time up to now. And if you really think about it, it really completely turns you off, completely puts you off cyclic existence. You completely lose your attachment to it. Like, think about, just even as a human being. So we're human beings right now. So this is supposed to be a really good kind of life in cyclic existence. It's a birth of high status, as we say. But if you think about it, in terms of the body, think about how much trouble we have to take care of this body. Think about the difficulties it gives us, because we have to face illness, we have the aging process, we have difficulties with food, and then with the mind also. There's all the terrible difficulties in the mind that come from not being able to get what we want, having to put up with things that we don't like, and how if we think about how our mind gets so very disturbed and agitated by the mental afflictions of attachment and anger and ignorance. No.
What is not what is
no.
어딘데 딱 간다. 제가 아니 허베 님이 삼다. 딱 코버들에 디레게 와야지. 디레게. 아니 디나라야 코베나라 알레 세가 된다. 랑 카마소. 거역 된다. 잠마도서. 딘데체네. 한다. 그게 말아서 아니 내가 딘데게 뒤도 사정이네 풍부도 유도 잠바. 니 가래서나 동의망고 유지 니 때나 영약 단대 동의기 땡시 동의 땡. 다 마음발로 동의망고 영약 니 풍부 니치도 니치도 내사고 내망고 사니 마음고 동의망고 영약이 양 디소요. 말아서 어디 삼다마시나 제가다 코바스인디 근데 니 코바디 뭐이 니즈 라나 강에 땡게 뭐네 자네기 어떤 딜現在 시작하면 응원의 자네기 다 다리 밀리든 코베 난게 밀리든 탑이요. 그래서 랑게 NP게 담배쳐도 제요. 그래서 응원의 자네기 NP게 타버 탑이 있는 타버 탑이야. 너봐 여봐. 타버 탑당 신 봐. 다가 난시 타베 신당 알아서 신망고 여러봐. 타베 신사 동이게 민자매. 딘데치리야. 알리 영어 봐 못도 있네. 딘데치리게 냐리야 드롭이 있네라 배트 로토비아케 단다비게 탑시 요인 그래 아니 뭐네 다좀 토베 있는다 인데이 오다 가서 오래 다른 알아서 리딘들레네 아니 대조 리딘스 데이터네 동의기 민사매 단돌 하던 그 상계 보마 신 동의의 대통이 딘데 쏴 누가 여봐 셔버체제 어디 인지미지 과바 셔버로네 탄도 있고 그랬어.
So if we think about it, then we see there's so many faults in psychic existence. We have all of the difficulties in connection with food, in getting the right clothing and so on, and all of that suffering. These contaminated, appropriated aggregates, those are the basis for us to experience all of that suffering that I've been talking about. It's the basis for that. And then also, because of these aggregates, if we don't understand how things work and we don't act properly, then on the base of these aggregates, we create so much negative karma so that we're going to experience suffering again in the future. And when we think about it, if we think about it in this way, then really and truly, you'll have no attachment towards psychic existence. And then this is really useful, because then you think that if you think about it, we have this human life, not just an ordinary human life, but one with all the leisures and endowments. We've met with the Dharma, and if we want to, we can find out how to achieve liberation, and we can achieve liberation. We can practice the methods that lead us in future to take birth as in a pure land. So there are pure lands, places where there's not even, you don't even hear about suffering. So we can do that. And as I said, we can, if we want to achieve the level of arhat, we can do that. And also enlightenment is possible for the sake of others. So all these things are possible. No.
뭐야? 어디세? 어다 디지 다서 somebody 니주게 베세서. 대다로 콘베 화베 핀소라 니 그래서 이미게지잖아 미신. 니저고도 타바 등에는 주는 대증이 좀 깨발라서.
Then there is, according to the heading, the definition of having generated renunciation. So it says, when by having trained in that way, there is no arising even for a second of attraction to the perfections of cyclic existence, all day and night, and all day and night, the intention seeking liberation arises, then the thought of renunciation has been generated. No.
뭐야? 아 대다 콘베스 오도지. 코베견도 뭐 니주 랑땡 강에 그제도 디사모탄 제바체. 아니 코베 뭐 니주 니미도 통하니. 아니 그래서 코바사 될이야. 동의성 매베 뒤주야 말이야. 내가 배당념지네 될 쳐버듯이 동의서. 근데 딱 그 사제기 때와 대동의들에 이네 동일 때는 그 대화스 레벨에 맞도 뭐 내주 동일해. 동일이 시험마다 그래서 그 딘데 짱짱 제시 용어로 와. 어디 선자 아니 대답 건데 거의 편소라. 거와 컨디시 미네. 이미 기지점이서 왔다 매버치 코발 된데 자원을 많이 비치지. 코백 견 통치. 어떻게 그랬어?
When we think about, in relation to ourselves, if we think about all of the different sufferings that we experience in psychic existence, the suffering nature of psychic existence, all of the faults that there are to psychic existence, then thinking about that, we'll see that there's not a moment when we're not experiencing the three types of suffering. So even when there's no particular experience of what we would describe as happiness or suffering, there's always the third kind of suffering, the pervasive compounded suffering, which is like, even when you're experiencing some kind of neutral feeling, still there is that suffering. And then when we're experiencing the suffering of change, which is what we normally think of as being happiness, actually, when we think about it, we see that that's only in the nature of suffering. That's only suffering. Really, it's just suffering. And then, of course, the suffering of suffering, there's no need to mention that. That one's very obvious. So in other words, by recognizing that we're always experiencing the three types of suffering continuously in psychic existence, that means we understand that there's always only nothing but suffering continuously. And then when we think about that, then we won't feel any attachment even for a moment to the anything in psychic existence. No.
뭐지? 다들 인생도 타바 되냐로 사지. 인생 그도 있네. 아니 그래서나 사제 년龄이 풍부. 코반 될라 이된 세상에. 병원에 다네 동인기 중공. 딘데시. 시바천 다 딜레 타네. 땡기 대바치 그도 타나 사베 딜레 탄도 있겠네. 딘데 다들 가사되는 중나트든 다바 정열로서 왜 로데 다스는 지망망 슈슈키 엠베 그뒤이네 어떤 거네 딜레 코발레 타는 땡게 때버시 타버시 토구도 선디 그뒤이네 봐 로데 끼기도나 현다 라우 마임베체 베 낭왕슈 끼기도나 아니 옹이 좀 깨버렸어 이좀 깨버렸어
And so here, when it talks about the definition of having generated renunciation, in other words, how do you know that you've actually generated this attitude of renunciation? Then what it's saying here is that when day and night, at all times, because you recognize that these contaminated aggregates can't be counted on, that they're the source of nothing but suffering and so forth, as I've explained, then you'll have this mind of liberation arising. And it's not just something that will arise from time to time. It's something that will always be there. You're always thinking, if only I could achieve liberation, I must achieve liberation, without anybody having to remind you or urge you to generate such a mind. It's always just like naturally there. At that point, you know that you have really generated renunciation. No.
Voilà so. 어딘세. 어딘데스. 니중데 깨비나. 들로디야나. 뒤티네 제제. 개바 컨디시 개바 치중도 개바 가르셰비네. 강가 타로토메 학교. 드네 코발레다 누구야? 용조 타로토메 학교. 탑에 사변 주고래. 대단 아니 이게 탑에 남나스마스 그래서 딱 람슈 강사 람슈 사이도와 소람 달 니지 진보 매나 아니 팀밍 소람 체 라니지고 비게도 다 디가 니지 진보 연나 단대베 랑 빵네 뭐 이내주 나 동에게 되게 여번 시 현다 또 된대 요섬 니게 동에를 타로 채나서 디게 니지 깨비나 아니 어다 티징 람슈 차르 어도 치제
When you have that kind of mentality, then everything that you do will become a cause for achieving liberation, and also you'll become what we call a path enterer, somebody who, in other words, somebody who has entered the path. So if that wish for liberation is not combined with compassion, great compassion, then you'll be a Hinayana path enterer. And if it is combined with compassion, in other words, you recognize that you just like you're suffering, also others are suffering, and you genuinely want to free them from suffering, then you become what we call a Mahayana path enterer. Now we move on to bodhicitta, which is the second of the three principal aspects of the path, and that one has got 2 points. First of all, there's an explanation of why we need bodhicitta, and then secondly, the method for developing bodhicitta. No. So it's just like it says, even if renunciation has been developed, it is not possessed by the mind of enlightenment. If it is not possessed by the mind of enlightenment, it does not become the cause of the perfect bliss of unsurpassed enlightenment. Therefore, the wise generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. No.
Rani kobe dungi no zutela pani any shen semjen tige chipare deva dugri dungi san dugu mari di teze gangen dusang dige gange sama dungi de tabachi chungna sambe dungi de chero chanson dungi de tabat nge chi udu som wo dindegi any wo semke bu le song tangoti.
So what this is saying is that even if you have renunciation, which means you recognize the suffering nature of cyclic existence regarding yourself, when you just have that, that's not enough. So what it's saying is the wise, which means in the context of the Mahayana, somebody who's wise and who understands that just like I myself want happiness and don't want suffering and never get the happiness that I want and always have to experience so much suffering, so also others are exactly the same. They want happiness, but they don't get the happiness they want. They don't want to suffer, but they have so much suffering. So therefore, I myself am going to free them from their suffering. That's the kind of attitude that we need. No.
타바토 란치고 란치고 시행강가 유언 란치고 베게다 딘데시마도 오 대용고 말했어. 제자 가려서나 뒤치고 뒤고 말해. 제자 신심지 동일 나와 마스비 니지게 심지 탐적이 된도 아니 베게 가려서나 오다 참바다 아니 참바 니지고 내라니 되게 된도 상계 고방 된도 니 보래. 오 딩예비나 아니 탑자 타바배 지나 타바래 디나 타바 침부 땡게 때봐 시작구 배드 지마치지 탱이 샘지 된 쳐발라 랑가 던지고 많이 심지가 던지고 매박혀는 매주켜는 매박 심지 가발라 던지고 있네 땡게 대박고야 누가 어딘데지 용거 분소 대박사 되래 어딘데지 용거 제가 내가 니주 뭐지 그 말이 전주성 공부랬어.
So we do need renunciation, that's for sure. We do need it. But besides that, not just thinking of ourselves, not just wanting to achieve liberation for ourselves without thinking of others, we need to combine that with loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. And in other words, we need to develop this determination to achieve great liberation, not just our own personal liberation, but great liberation, which means enlightenment. Because when we're able to seeing that, when we achieve enlightenment, then we'll be able to help all sentient beings and without any effort. No.
타의 심지 탐지기 대전 좀 몇몇 그 사실 이티래요. 제가 신파 탐바 신 피게 가르서는 되게 참바도 제벽관에 신 심지 찌기네 간다다 그게 팬심주야나. 오 다티 상계 쳐봐 피벌레 심지를 팬심 개바티 오선은 쳐버렸어요. 제가 심다 심지 찌라. 다 대마세 심정원의 동의 begin nothing 타이어 망고 쉬어요 봐 되게 아니 되게 내 땡게 대발고 인사 딘데 쌤께비 인다 큰 시야봐요 뭐 스페인 뭐 어디를 송도 와 어디를
What it says regarding this in the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life is that even if we have the wish to help even just one sentient being, it's really a wonderful thing, and it's a tremendous offering to the Buddhas. And if in that case, what need to mention if your wish is to be of benefit to infinite sentient beings?
어떠잖아. 어디지? 다더니 이제 다 간다. 전주쌤 삼바상보 때다 미중 게 대가는 삼바상보체 애니 양답에 따와 공비이나 그는 뭐 인내주 은백이 톱잘라는 매 어떻게 연구를 대마 인배체 가서 그래 아니 우리 다 도시나 간다 전주쌤도 이해나 대박 큰데 제비 있네 은백이 라면 전주 교로 상계 토야 교로 그랬어 란치부지 말미시베 신심제 탐제 대야고 딘데 도르스 어디 송을 터잖아.
Really, we need renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view, realizing emptiness, because with those three, then, without question, we will be able to achieve the peerless goal of enlightenment. And particularly, once you have bodhicitta, the awakening mind of bodhicitta, then everything you do becomes a cause of enlightenment. No.
당에 빼샤긴다. 빼나로 시나. 아니 고무치기. 돌아치기. 야군조 쳐가 필요하다. 필요했는데 야 배교부 샘지 교인데. 이게 돌아치기. 진바단. 오테들 편도 제비네. 다 알레 미니 여비나. 미니부디 dollar chigi any shana pensim che maraba shana ba chimba tang ina ran chibu ni jung ke ni ran chibu bi samu tan o tindis bi chimba tang ba tela chimba tang chikche chigi ani bi semje tang je deng de gu yin sembe samba sangbo o semge jachim bo di sembe ko ne dollar chig jimbi ina pa chimba tang ya la gyuchi bare dollar chig 래 망용 개야마 찍거래 이나양 딘 데부티 자바는 다야마 데부티 가래서는 찍기 란치고 비게 란치고 튼다라야 지마당 소놈게 란 비게 가리 있네 다 타버터에 있는 기체 찍기 타입의 심진 탐지 배땡 되고 그 대체도 상자 고반 통인 선배 대체도 은백에 들이 짐바로 봐. 대소남디 은배 장가태야 말. 타입의 선제 장가요 말. 난가 타입을 선제 요로 봐. 어 되게 치단 인사 어 대소남디 큐네. 제부 소남 큐 잡은 자야 말.
So let me give you one example. Suppose you've got two people and each of them makes the offering of $1 to the Buddha, or it could be, you know, they both of them give $1 to the sentient to a sentient being, a poor sentient being. If one of them has the wish to gives the dollar or offers the dollar with the wish to help, with the wish to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, and the other gives in order to achieve their own personal liberation, so they want to create merit, and so, you know, so that they can achieve their own liberation, even though what they've given is exactly the same. Each of them, it was just the $1, but there would be no comparison when it comes to the result that follows from that act, because one has very limited merit. One, you know, with one of them you only create limited merit because you're only doing it for your own personal liberation, whereas in the other case, because you're doing it for the sake of infinite other sentient beings, then the merit is immeasurable. No. It's just no. It's just like it says in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. There's a verse which mentions it compares the virtue of actions done with bodhicitta compared with the actions that are done without bodhicitta. So those that are done without bodhicitta are just like Shantideva used the analogy of a plantain, not a plantain tree, maybe a plantain tree, maybe it's a banana tree. Anyway, once the fruit has been used up just that once, then that's it. You don't get any more fruit coming from that plant. Whereas in the case of bodhicitta, it's not like that. It gives the actions give the actions done with bodhicitta give the results continually. You know, they never get used up. No. So what this verse is saying is that other virtues, it could be the same action. So the action is the same, and therefore it's going to bring happiness in the same way. Both of them are virtues. So, if it's done without bodhicitta, and so forth, then, it will still bring a good result. And when it's done with loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta, it's also going to bring a good result. But in case of the action or the merit that was done without bodhicitta, once the result has come, then that's it. It's finished. The result is finished. But in the case of actions done with bodhicitta, then that action will bring its results, positive results, good results, but then it'll keep bringing the good results. It's not like it gives the results and then that's it. It'll keep bringing good results, and that's something that will go on endlessly. No.
어떻게 다디 미중 직발해 배 과외 동의 과외 경하고 탄대여 봐 직발해 양타고 따와 곰 고래 직발해 디진데 팀이 개박해 요만 다디 가린다 그랬으나 아니 버루들 꾸모 란치고만 임바체 신 디게 동에 나와라 마세베 엠비게 미중스네 다다 신을 밤이도 좀 닝지스 우디 유메 관에 개박치면 삼바자치.
And so when we think about the Mahayana and the Hinayana, both of them need renunciation. For both, renunciation is indispensable. Also for both, the view realizing emptiness is indispensable. The difference between them is in terms of the motivation. So in the case of the person who is practicing the Mahayana, then for them the motivation involves a kind of compassion for others, where you just cannot stand that they're suffering, and so you're completely filled with this determination to free them from suffering. No.
뭐지? 단계랑 게 뒤송이 그래. 가서 아니 년대 셰리프다 뭔가 붙다고 딱 배경만에 다네 최송 살아봐. 진짜는 신기 동송 가 동송 동가와 니 년대 망고 디제기 아니 다 동송 신기를 봐. 나랑서 지딘 네 집에 간다. 딘데 통규직을 동송 쓰기가 그래. 딘데 그 망고 딘데 간데 엔베 다티베 초교 녀랑기 딩미 가서 녀랑기 엔비가 동반이 개배 파도다. 개배 파도. 뒤주름부. 딘데 공부다. 아니 전주쌤 교리인 게 장세 내 탐고 봐스. 동반이 무슨 또야 말해. 내 탐고 봐. 디진남 슈고다 봐. 딘데기 내 탐고디 동반이 니머지 공부대. 실을 버렸지만 니머지 공부대. 표현 처벌했어. 우리 상계랑 somebody.
The Buddha himself taught that if all of the hearers, I think you know what a hearer is, like his main disciples, Shariputra and Moggallana, so they were hearer practitioners. So if all of the 3,000 worlds, in other words, this is talking about a billion world systems, were filled with these hero practitioners meditating on emptiness, and not just meditating on emptiness briefly, but for eons, meditating for eons on emptiness. The benefit of a new bodhisattva, not like some kind of senior, very advanced bodhisattva, one who's just become a bodhisattva, if they meditate for one day on emptiness, in other words, if they meditate for one day on the perfection of wisdom, the benefits of that would be far greater. No.
Voilà, so the tadi tagarare ani pigi kalsa nyerangi mirere dumiri komba de mirere set komba so set komba re nyeran tichi komba yena miti chik set komba 개바치 보는 개바치고 다라네. 단도 전주 선바 디 고면디 라치 미치게 된다 말이야. 타예 심지 탐지 돈도 공부 선상. 다디 뭐네 디 치도 공부를 밑에 가서 단가 편이야 말이야. 타예 심지. 대선도 손은 못 친구 용한테다. 그 그놈이 친구를 봐. 고면치고 지gan이 있네. 대부 천대로야 말.
So not just hearers, but also solitary realizers. And the reason that there is such a difference is because whether we're talking about 10,000 hearers and solitary realizers meditating on emptiness, or however many there are, they're all doing the meditation just for themselves. Whereas in the case of the Bodhisattva, they're not doing it just for themselves. They're doing it for the sake of the infinite sentient beings, all sentient beings. So that means infinite sentient beings. And it's for that reason that the benefit is so much greater. So in other words, what you can see is the difference between them is in why there is so much more benefit to that one bodhisattva meditating just for one day on emptiness is because of the motivation. No.
어디지? 배나로 지나 아니 사변 비가서래. 오, 다른 것도 별이 내 샤그바 다도 보샤네 내이네. 근데 이게 때문에 추도 류다 되죠. 잡이나. 사변 딜 아니 비게 다 팬도 칭이스는다. 추를 류도 간가 어디 내가 누구게 간게 줄도요. 용서. 가르친 그래. 진실치긴. 봐. 어디 당시 삼바삼보 전주 생의 신비이나 삼바삼보의 신나 개와 강 제가 탐제디 오랑 상계 토야 어디 교차로 간가 상마 어 개바 용용지네 어디게 간게 규칙이 침보시 송인자 용인자 언제부 침보용이야 어디네 도시
So if we think of the analogy of planting a barley seed, so I'm talking about barley seed because that's important for Tibetans. That's what main thing that we would plant in Tibet. So when you have that one barley seed and you help it with manure and with fertilizer, with water and so forth. So all of those would act as the cooperative conditions. The fertilizer, the water, and so on. They would be the cooperative conditions for the plant to grow. And then, so that's about the cooperative conditions and so forth. So, like that, so even though it's one small seed, with all of those, then you can get the plant growing. And in the case of if we apply this to understanding the way that the virtues can bring huge results, it's because bodhicitta, if the action is held by bodhicitta, so then the bodhicitta becomes this wonderful cooperative condition, which makes that virtue, even though it might be a very small one, might seem to be something very small, quite trifling, it becomes a cause of enlightenment. No.
Oh yeah, that's enough. 진주 나태성이라고 봐. 샘진 티다 니랑은 랑도 된데스. 미나도 미미나. 신경도 하라게스. 지당 샘진 다 깨다 침보인데 과배 나려야 당고 깨다 침보 요래 배 투도 침보인데 요래 망고 요래디 디솔이야 아니 되게 랑배 타바토 원에 다나 땡게 니중점에 매버이나 아니 심지 탐제 같은 거 상게 뭐지 탐제 땡게 되고 그것은 딘데센다 가와가와 밀런투야 말이 왜나 가와게요 그래서 다는 아주 딘데 기교에 베디 딘데 여가 깨와 상고 시라리 제가 로드는 봐 원본는 뭐 이렇게 나서 이지미지 선택 깨고 해서
So it also says in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life that this thought, which sentient beings normally don't even have for themselves, even if they're in their dreams. So here we are thinking of this not just for ourselves, but for the sake of all sentient beings. So this wonderful thought, this thought of bodhicitta, is something we definitely need to generate. So this is what it says in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life.
So good. 뭐 다가르샤 다 디네 오래 다 디나래 딘데시도와 전주 쓰면서 안디 아니 이게 가르서는 다 간다 될래야 뭐 인데서 깨빈다 심하게 깨비네 근데 참바다 잡아배 딘데 딘데 여비나 아니 배 가르선 디 전주 쓰면 깨인 거래 전주 쓰면서 라마메 원래 거래 제가 딘데 종이나 아니 디디 코란게 바장로 다 씀직 디디 코란에서 초자천부대 코란랑 초사도 그래 다디네 녀손 깨앗간 다디 녀손 깨봐 독자들 깨져봐 이 친구할 때 맞으면 코란랑 전주선 이유는 이게 그래 아니 가려서 개치슈 상계 다 토저 타도 상계 고만 토야 돼 어디 연구를 해서 전주선 승인데 배티 직 탐제 용이 랑거 통다 강거 되기 싫었어 딘데스 강하시라 여러분
Bodhicitta, then, so now it talks about the way to actually generate bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is something really wonderful, and it's very highly praised as something which brings everything that we could possibly want. So when you have genuine loving kindness and compassion, then bodhicitta is something that arises follows quite naturally from that. And when you have that bodhicitta, then it's something which purifies very powerfully. So it's a very powerful purifier. It's also a very powerful accumulator of merit. It stops you from being born in the lower realms, and it causes you to achieve enlightenment. No.
전주 쌤이 아니 이게 깨비나 순을 간사 순을 깨비네 시중 개매체 간다 순을 깨비네 계시 깨봤다가라 그래서 전주 쌤이 계시 화배 전라다면 화배나 동인 얀대니 어디 순을 깨비네 아니 양단 디시남이 세기 디시 상계게 세스 게세 사디 민기토네 어디 민기 터버레스 된그 차네 지들 하드미 제베 용속 차차를 짜침부터 어딘데 차버레스 어디래
Again, it says in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life that whoever generates bodhicitta, who is imprisoned in the dungeons of cyclic existence. In other words, whoever is in the prison of cyclic existence, whoever it is, it doesn't have to be a great person. If it's a great person, or if it's a very a lowly person, the moment that they generate this attitude of bodhicitta, then immediately they're known as a child of the Tathagatas. In other words, a child of the victorious ones, the Buddhas, and immediately they become worthy of prostration by all human beings and gods. No.
뭐라서 다가는 시대와 디고톱지 신도 미세 전에 빨라되는 지고 전보다 강화되는 이게 두고 텔라 박진남이 지미데스 제가 나도 세코토는 과배나 사기겐 디고 디마사사요 말 디고 백문에 단 레우미요 말에마도 디고 톱지 쇼트는 사 백문에 타네 오 디고 동이 치부냐야 디고 사요 디고 톱지 신도 제나야 근데 제위네 빨라되네 가서 디고 동이 신도 제나야 강화되는 이게 두요 다 딘데 제위는 딘데 지미네 전주쌤 깨비이나 딘 디고 동이 되요 말했어 빨라네 이게 가래서나 아니 벤 지고침 가대는 벤 밑보다 가다 딘데지 바뀌면 그 शे고 말와 어디는 신체제 디고 커제 제유는 디고 제부터는 지고 말해 어떤 거는 되네 되네 대바치 디네 체제 동의 매버치 되네 대바치 도야 어떻게 되는 거래서 제가 때가 박진은 미지만 박진 딕지 세네다 아니야 뭐의 내주 오 단다 시나 용기 딘데 있는 대신시 전주선 깨고도 팬 딘데도 가서 거야
It also says in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life that that even if we've done the most awful negative actions. So in fact, if we think of past lives, there's no negative action that we haven't done. So even though we might have done the most evil actions, most powerfully strong negative actions, still when you generate bodhicitta, you wouldn't need to experience suffering as a result of that. And this is just like if you are in a dangerous place with a very brave and very powerful guard, then you wouldn't need to be afraid in that place. No.
to samdane kheba shitayo tandara ngoi nezu any semji ganga jibo marwa ga she be chado chingin yore neba chingin yore oda dindegi rana misambata ngoi nezu be dinde yudu teba min tele ninjike chamba zabaki ninjike bina o pa kunjin da jikpe wo ma ga shorwa di lamsan ba shintoya o die yungre daga nanshi 이게 띵중 동배 통다 삼단 헐밍 딜라 디 배문에 네 컨디션도 되는 라왕게 맵 코카레스는 그게 따서인 거 되게 어도 제바잖아 뭐 니즈 아니 이게 가서래 그 라왕게 맵딩 어딘데 싫어봐 어딘데 뒤담이 딘데 셰비나 샘기를 가봐 뭐 니즈 개발도 디버션 누구야 막 어딘데 개발요 도선.
And if we think about it now, there are people who might be jealous of us and competitive towards us, and maybe our tendency would be to get upset with them, to want to get our own back on them. We might think of revenge. We might feel spiteful towards them. But instead, here with the bodhicitta, instead, you would feel compassion towards them. And by thinking about emptiness and dependent arising, then we see that they have no control, they have no choice. And so, what I'm saying is that when you have that kind of bodhicitta way of thinking of things, then that makes sure that whatever happens, all that you do is something virtuous. No.
Notice the that's that cabayo. Oh, I control is combayina. At combayina, Ali the run nuclear, one get tambo run nuclear, control. And it to dang and a shell never get what a kanda. Ranshi Tamshel never shadava. Not under Chamba the Zabati coming. They'll soon the pop combayina. Or rang it and what I'm thinking. Then piggy shelleva, good chimboda. When needs what tinted tone. Any shell and when that pinky Tamaran Jaga Channel Pinker, what in the song that teach you cabayo, piggy, something.
And then it also helps when we think if we think about with anger. The fact that when we get angry, first of all, it harms ourselves. Then also, when you're under the control of anger, gradually you harm others. So really, anger is something that does nothing but harm to oneself and others. Whereas in contrast to that, if you meditate on patience, this is something that helps you. And when you're thinking of patience, then in that way you get to think about others as being helpful. You begin to see how helpful others are. So there's a big difference between these two ways of thinking, isn't there? Thinking with anger and thinking with patience. No.
What is that in a never Chaju sim dear top or top division? What the much we that or indeed Chaju sim dear Shanlina. Dashing Yamji one, Maringelia, there were Gundemanga doing Chaju sim dear, Damachi. Then Dashing Yamji one, the Orwani. Tabani pearl tire, Tatakarwa. When is her Ine and Della Ramsotelia, Mixig. Tinta Kigama so much. Della that under no sugar chushi, that never mixes, you never so much. That is Jambea Mema. But mix it this because Dashing Yamja did Kagama so much. 我有就是把送下游的了呀，你要现在没啥写的，他说的技术的，这个什么技术的？
So now I'm going to start explaining the actual method for generating bodhicitta. And one thing that's very interesting is that in other texts, it talks about how there are two ways of generating bodhicitta. There's the seven-part cause and effect instruction, and equalizing, exchanging self and others. So these are the two methods for generating bodhicitta that are known in Tibet, and that's really, you know, how things are. There are those two ways. But in this three principal aspects of the path, it doesn't mention about those two ways. It doesn't go into those two. It launches straight into how things actually are for the sentient beings, and it's a very powerful way of developing bodhicitta, which comes from the instructions of Manjushri. No.
What is it? That is the Sutra Chu Yun Baga Legi Chingwa Tambe Tam. Tangzi Zagi Tabe Buz Marim the Marching Quinity. Mumi Silva Gishi Jabba Tungisum Kijame. Not Negum the Daki Manam, Nazusam and some of the Jabba.
No. So this is these very kind of like exceptional explanation of how to generate bodhicitta that comes in the next two verses. So here it's numbered 7 and 8. So you've got swept away by the current of the four powerful rivers, tied by the tight bonds of karma, so hard to undo, caught in the iron net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance, endlessly born in psychic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings, thinking that all mothers are in such a condition generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. No.
Adi Tangudi, Sutra Chushi Gunshers. Tale Rane Chetina, Ran Tichaning in Jurava, and the Shen Jen Passy. Or the cover with some J. Contiguous, non-zulity, on the net art, contiguous. Sutra Chushi. The Karesana, Covenalia, and Rawameva G. Any Gangocha, Na, Chi. All the teacher work Semare, take on ya, and pay Mindu Mango, Dungi Mango Shich, what in this ship? You are a Chazan. I live the Karesan, Jagan is going younger Yorba, what this one, what the kids, Samativa.
So when we're thinking about this verse, trying to understand this verse, then it simplifies things, or it helps to think about it in relation to yourself, because as we know, when you think about suffering in relation to yourself, then through that you generate renunciation, and when you think about it in relation to others, then you generate great compassion. So what this is saying is that as long as we're in samsara, in cyclic existence, then continuously we have the suffering of being born, then we have there's the suffering of aging, there's the suffering of illness, and then eventually the suffering of dying, and then in the meantime we have so much suffering which we don't want to happen, but anyway, so much suffering that takes place. No.
Oh yeah, what did you? That cover some jet is all. Any the sugar should rip Sargo shoot the Machu Trago shoot the Sana, the Baru Degmar, bet my sign, the Yaskawan Yama. What didn't she? Bet shoot target, Tindiji, bet too much, you want to see. Yeso Karamaji Gallo never, Covena, this cover within the land, and some jet to get to meet in the Yan, yes, no never. What did it to me that Tungisum Yorba? Because I Tungisum Tate or Tungisum Kingerwa, what did not?
And so what this is talking about is the kind of suffering that the sentient beings are experiencing, we have to experience, and what the sentient beings are experiencing. So where it says the current of the four powerful rivers, So the analogy then is of, well, it says 4 powerful rivers. So it's talking about, if you think about 4 very strong currents, like so water falling down a steep mountain, traveling down a steep mountain with 4 powerful currents. And then that water, of course, is not going to stop for even a moment, is it? It's continuously moving, continuously happening. So in other words, this is talking about how, continuously, without a moment's rest, we're continuously having to experience the 3 types of suffering, which I think, you're quite clear about already. No.
너가 내 이치 못한다는 너가 디 코베 심진 디게라 상게 디게 참또 잡아 쉬어였다. 잡아요. 잡아 맞지 투요. 누워요. 상게야. 요래 이내야 심지 디게 소나 마이베 렉 소나게 렉다 된도 머리고 왕게 소나 마이베 렉 년도 자와마 깨빈사 너가 디레스 디게 그 레선 비긴 상게 디게 투도 주주 잡아 가자이네 나야 개네. 너가 그 상계 야차잖아. 이게 요마로 어디서 너가 레기치고 코란스 쓰지 레선 뭐 됐듯이 너가 레기치고 담배 담스 근데
And then it says tied by the tight bonds of karma, so hard to undo. So what this means is that even though the Buddhas have so much affection for the sentient beings and have so much power and ability, nevertheless, because the sentient beings from their side have created demeritorious karma, negative karma, therefore they're continuously suffering. And this is something that the Buddhas, despite all of their affection and all of their abilities, they can't just stop the sentient beings from suffering. They can't just sort of like reach over and pull them out of that suffering. No.
What is it? That's 당진 짜기 타베 부스스. 디 과와케야 규디 단지르바. 단지모. 단지 띵문에 타네. 단지 생기 일단 저와 망원의 광선지 되게 요래. 친 디간데 단도 군대왕 쇠니. 다스 디점박 같은 문에 타는 교회 매버치. 다 딘데스 군대왕 요래 와서 내슈 먹었지. 이게 가서 떡지라마지 다서 큰 매니시 양자 딘데스지 짐바. 어디시에도 좀 단지 짜기 타와. 샤고 시지. 어디 디부츠가 내시. 과거가 되게 들었어. 내로마통.
So then it says, caught in the iron net of self-grasping. So grasping at a self is the cause, the root cause of all suffering. And so it's like an iron net that we're trapped in, because it's something that we have a beginningless habit of, and it's something that is quite arises naturally. It's not something you need to learn how to do. It just happens quite instinctively, and it's a mind which thinks that something which is totally non-existent, it thinks it exists. Like, for example, thinking that there's a permanent, partless, and permanent, single, and independent self. Sorry, so permanent, single, and independent self, even though there's no such thing. And then so that mind, that self-grasping mind, whose object is totally non-existent, that's the root cause of all of that suffering. No.
What is it? 당지 짜게 보스 피게 상계 좀된 직된 팬에 아니 지금 뭐 송. 뭐네 타니. 근데 따와 딘중 유세던 거 딘중 된 딘중선다 라왕게 요마스 첸 심마치시에 송거로 봐. 다 딘데 시켜네. 암조 마호베이나. 어다 짜 타베 보나래. 뭐에 니스 짐버티. 다란 지데거 봐. 딘데 암조 고야 잡아 칭이나. 엔 봐도 난. 대성계야 딘데 용거로 봐. 어디 되래 세상 뭐다 딘데 촌 망제 구마봐 마화비 인자 아니 태색 어다 당지 짜기 되는 베티 화배 짜고 안돼 그래서
Again, with this line, caught in the iron net of self-grasping. So you see the Buddha came into the world and he taught about how everything is a dependent arising, and for that reason he taught nothing exists independently. So he taught that, but if you've never heard that teaching, then for you the self-grasping would really be like an iron net that you're caught up in. If you've heard that teaching, then it would be a bit different. You would have some kind of, you'd wonder if maybe things don't exist in the way that the self-grasping mind thinks that they do. But otherwise, most sentient beings have never heard of that, right? So for them, they really are caught up in this iron net of self-grasping. No.
What is it? Then I do what the Mori Maxim Guinea keeps there. Mori. Oh, that caressana. Maranzo Kovaja Tunitsavadi, Sugineluti, Tinjung Pongwet and the Shim. That you can marry with Mashimche. Oh, we need to. Oh, Kovetzawa, not to Tungia, Zavadi, Mariwari. Oh, did Mariwati, Mariwima. 롱 튜버 이버티 미시버치체 대가나야 아니 렌데르모 레 이게 가서다 자고야다 지마고야 큐는 미시미체 누버투고 머르면 무지 막진 거니 팁스 다 잡아든데 법에 드레시도 나고 마찬데 연구도 봐 어디나시 가야 마시 어딘데 심지되게 과변 심지 패시들이 어 예송 머르면 마치 거니 팁스
Then looking at the last line, it says completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance. So what this is talking about is how even though ignorance is the root cause of all of our suffering, we have no awareness at all that there's anything wrong with that mind. We have no awareness at all. And we also are not we don't understand about karma. In other words, we don't know what it is that we should do and what we shouldn't do. And so this unknowing is just like the sky being completely pitch black, in a sense, full of thick darkness, so you can't see anything. No.
무다 타사 집어 타매봐 코바 디네 고쪽에 켠산 타 디네 고쪽이 다 디네 조을사 켠매봐 무미 소땅원에 타네 무다 타매봐 이리 진의 용이 디네 데 조을사 켠매봐 땅원에 타는 코베 나요 코바 타다 되게 무미 세바지 신께 봐 코베 나요 깨네 아니 동의성이 균 동의성부터는 균이 예봐 산다 균도네 가르쳐 처부도 중에 옆에 뒤간테 참선 동의 참선 가서 유배 동의 딘디 짱짱 chen 딘디에서 동의성 규제 매바나 규제 매다 버루 켜내 매바 딘디 짱짱레스 사정이는 풍부 여분 다 말해
And it goes on to say, endlessly reborn in cyclic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings. So endlessly reborn in cyclic existence. This is referring to the fact that there's no beginning at all to cyclic existence. There's not a point that you can. There's no way you can point out and say this is where it began. It has no beginning, and also it's endless. We can't say this is where it finishes. So all that time that you're involved in that, caught up in that, then you're always experiencing the three types of suffering. So the pervasive suffering, so that's there all the time. And then sometimes there's, besides that, there's the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change. So there's always some suffering or the other. And this, of course, is when you still have these contaminated aggregates. No.
내가 비를 주면 많은 게 가지스는 생각해 봐 주스. 답이 꼭 들어봐. 내가 오 심지 대화변은 내다. 내가서 내다. 콘저 내다 컨디션. 오 내다 딘디치. 콘저 오 내다. 어디 심지 탐지 다 내다. 다 심지 탐지 써야 돼. 니들 다 터져. 다고 실행이 뒤에 가가로 봐. 되게 많이 아까다 거기나 유니티 어데레 나즈르티 내다도 어딘데 디스함다 시버신 아니 ongazusan semjoke was oda semjosa karesana 이게 내가 말씀이 내가 매번 말해 내가 그냥 보면 내가 땡디 차 내가 요 제가 되게 아니 내가 그도 그 참바다 동의 되도 이제 끊어라니 아니 어 상게 고한다 semjoke스 어때
So if you think in this way about how things are for the sentient beings, and so here it says thinking that all the mothers are in such a condition. So of course it would be a bit of a silly mistake to think all sentient beings are in this kind of situation, because of course there are those hearers and solitary realizers who've achieved liberation, and of course they're not experiencing that, and there are sentient beings who are in the pure realm, so it's not like that for them either. But otherwise, generally speaking, the countless infinite mother sentient beings, they are experiencing suffering in that way. And so what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying here is, if you think about that, then what you need to do is generate loving kindness towards all sentient beings, compassion for them, great compassion for all sentient beings, and then based upon that, generate bodhicitta, the mind that wants to achieve enlightenment for their sake. No.
뭐야 어디서 죄송합니다. 심지디 탐제 아니 대박 커져 주는 초심행이 대박 되어 대백 유장 두신 거 대백 유등시 동의사도 첨사 신시전 누구야마 동의 망마시 유튜버로 다 대박 되게 대박네 동의만 되게 동의가 말이 안 먼저 되신 거 스타트스를 도신 CNS.
In other words, we need to understand that all sentient beings, no matter how much they want all happiness. It's not like there's any limit to the happiness they want. They want all kinds of happiness, but they don't know how to create the causes of happiness. So what they end up actually doing is creating nothing but the causes for suffering. No.
어다 뒤들기다 코베 심지마다 심지 간걸 잡기면도 다 좀. 그 방사. 방사. 다가나 히 다고 신의 요 어떻게 되는 거. 되게 켜매지. 막 코어가는 좀 잡으티기.
But again, don't think that this is something that refers to all sentient beings, because of course there are those arhats who are not experiencing this at all. So all the other sentient beings we're thinking about.
그렇잖아. 나대 단도 대샤기 당고대 아니야. 소딩이 버체 다 양답에 답을 마시야시 야고도 터잖아.
No. Okay, so we'll stop there for now, and then next what I'll be doing is explaining about the correct view. No.
터잖아. 됐을 때.
No.
그렇지.
사제 버게주제 메토tra 리라리지니 데게맛 상게진도 메테베와게 도쿠난다진 저바쇼 이당구로라나면라감니 다야메
두지체
투지나. Thanks everybody.
No.
Back what time? Okay, looks like everybody's gone.
아무도 되나? 수업을 깔아요. 아무도 되나? 이제. Yeah. Honest.
Sajibage Juju Meta Religion Degeman Sangay Tokyo Namda Jing Chapa Etang Guru Ranamenda Ayame.
어떠셨나? sta division 살다. 나 주선에 선제 기본 저 심지 기주티 그게 다입니다. 근데 와치 딱 되는 거래. 어떠잖아. 다 되네. 선주 심 기주 다 뒤쪽 같이 다 되네. 숨바. 사실 Sentiero. Non da fare. 뭐야? 이제 되게 오르셈게 뭐같지? 다 간다. 심지 동에 나와 단다 배 라한테는 니주 공부하면 신이주 공부는 현파 카페나 니지 심보스 그래. 대체 되네다. 아니 비게 내가 모두 대바다. 되네 따조조 계시지 때 타바 땡기 때봐. 어디 딘디지. 딘데 용야 될 비게 딘디지 내야지. 참말 딘디지 용야지 제도 사무다야 될 딘델 참바스 그래. 딘디체네 다 가래서는 참바다 제베 타니 아니 가래선다 학성 심진 디게 탐지 동의 교제제 땡기 때바라라랑 그게 있어. 어디 가래서 학성 니지스 어디 듣고 그랬어.
I've explained how to generate bodhicitta, so I think that that will suffice. The explanation will suffice for now. And now I want to go on to the third one, which is the correct view. So just a few concluding remarks about the bodhicitta. So as we know, when you think about suffering in reference to oneself, then you generate renunciation. And when you switch the object of your meditation to all sentient beings and think of their suffering, then you have great compassion. So then with loving kindness, this mainly means wanting all sentient beings to achieve the lasting happiness of liberation. And so then on top of that, you need the special intention. So not just loving kindness, wanting all sentient beings to be happy, and compassion, wanting them to be free of suffering, but taking the responsibility for bringing about that oneself. No.
다 간다 어디체 다 섬제 탐제 땡기 때버는 랑구에서부터 들이 쿨켜버디 백문에 타네 하삼 니지스 쿨케네 이나야 라나야 단단 네버 여르베스노 섬제 탐제 알레 코버도야샤 알레 라 타바 토요 말에 제단 대송 인상 아니 심지 탐제 땡게 대박 거야 돼. 배점하고 거야 돼. 가와요 그랬으나 상계 톱이나. 아니 가서래. 어떤 배점해 봐. 랑게 된 주버래라. 신게 된 주버를 배점 사는 거. 근데 소인자 상계 거만 두고 또. 대마도 큰 짱도 쓰면서 我상계 돈도 냐셔 봐. 我的地来没吧 전주 샘스를 오사도 상계 토가 지기 원에 다른 선제 되게 된다. 상계 토 고도 어도 데 remember 샘지스.
With the special attitude, then you take responsibility for all sentient beings. And then when you think to yourself, well, though I've taken responsibility for all of them, how can I liberate them from all their suffering? How can I bring them to that kind of happiness when even I myself haven't yet achieved liberation? So then when you go into this, then you reach the conclusion that if you could achieve enlightenment, then you would really be able to liberate sentient beings and guide them to true happiness without effort. So then you make the decision, therefore, I have to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So that mind thinking, I want to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, that's what we call the wishing bodhicitta. No. No. No, Lale.
그렇잖아. 나 되네. 어디지? 아. 멤버 전주 선대요. 근데 제비인 지단한테 변신 첨부래. 이나양 조 가리고 선다. 멤버 지고 뒤로.工作전주 선다. 전다 전주 습니요. 다다 니조 대工作形式写个有的이나야. 전다 전주 선대. 면效果그래. 어디 마셔나? 어디 비게 가려서 상계 토배하고 너가 여봤다. 아니 상계 비게 그랑 비게 토배하고 너가 여봤다랑 비게 간다 톡톡이 여봐. 다 계속 이지매직 신고로 봐. 신고 그래. 그래서나 다다 계속 다 쪼가 그도래. 손 그래. 다 비게 전다 제주선 다 쪼쪼디 그래서는 생기 신이 손에 다 쪼쪼디 가 그도 손 그래. 어디
Now, even if you just have that wishing mind, there are huge benefits. There's a huge benefit to that. So it's really quite amazing. So then bodhicitta, we talk about two types of bodhicitta. There's the conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. So ultimate bodhicitta is something we really need to understand. First of all, that's the first thing we need to understand, because with the understanding of ultimate bodhicitta, then you know that you are capable of achieving enlightenment. So, of course, it's really important to know that it's possible that you do have the ability to achieve enlightenment. And principally where you come to that kind of insight is through studying the tantric teachings. No.
Oh yeah. Lama chebe na ya. Dipelhengi dewe ishi chugun rang xin zhe na tebe yin. Yilme den kunja kunja da toma da re. Gusa no chanju sengwe kyo so ba de. Kunyo san tuandamgi chanju sengwe kyo so ba de sa shi to. O de nyamne kin bure.
And in fact, in the Lama Chöpa, there is a verse, one of the request verses. In fact, it's the last of the request verses, and it's in that verse that you have a sort of summary of this point. The nature of ultimate bodhicitta and how you can, therefore, how it is possible for you to achieve enlightenment. No.
세상 뒷대생기 데리시스 방그 생수가 상계 고발 두발 치료 두고요. 어디 아니 되게 라는 내가 봐. 어디 다 딥데링이 딥데스 랑게 셈텔이야 명몽 쇼야마 꽤 짜와네요 셈디 나만에 요 상계 살리다가 어떤 우리 꽤 매봐 연된다 막 어디를 시다디 데레 딥데링이 되지 어디 셈텔하나요 상계 두야게 어디 규제 연매나 어디래
So when it says the Jimilingi Gaurabana, so the because Dinsara Indina Dunan Janjugi Sem the Pue
전화 전주 섬이 좀
no Koyana. The Dibdelingi Devi Yishiji, Chugan Rajin Devi, Yemi Lunda Masanju, Donajan Sensu, Kulabu Rala. No. So, yeah, so it's actually the offering verse, so Lama Chaba verse 36. So at the beginning there it says unobstructed great transcendental wisdom simultaneous with bliss. So anyway, it has that it says unobstructed, or in other words, more literally free of obscurations. So what this is talking about is how our mind is free of obscurations, in the sense that the obscurations that are there are not an inherent characteristic of the mind, so they can be removed. No.
어떠시나 다디 상알라미 그들을 단다 알레디 샤야 거부 말에 저단디 다 주고 뭐니지 파 못해 장공 검자스들이 디손단디 다 마원발 다 가르선 다 가서디 개청부시다래 단다 알랭에디두스 디 단다 상아샤에 뒤주 말에 저단 다스 쉬마도 어딘데시 요리 쉬마도 어도시 도잖아.
So I'm just mentioning that for the time being. This isn't the right occasion, the right place to go into these ideas and the meaning of this verse, because it's a tantric teaching. But generally speaking, nevertheless, it is something that's important to understand, and it's something that we need to learn about in the future. No.
뭐야 어떻게 따라간다 주주나 소화제 다들 신경 동네다 양다지와 마찬가지나 관계니도 누시 코바나야 대원에 공연이 다조 가래서나 아니 이게 가래서는 참바도 잡아게 봐야지 아니 이게 개침부시라래서 그래서나 말 펜제이나 저번만 몰라 이게 다 대원 다 지고 되는 신 예바 통이 신은 내가 깨게 요래 다는 신 아니 뭐 내주 이게 신 상담 거야 말봐 다 당디 이게 가서 카균이 다 신념지 시도 잠바 심도 파 교회 계절에 아니 말 배랑 지고 삼 신배 예바 도디 오파 균이 신 제바지 랑 예바 도스다 개요 말디 님의 선바 유바다니 님마 랑 선바는 신파 참바도 잡아티파 게니 오도 제고를 손을 대체비나 대체비나 아니 가서 오래 뭐는 다네 참지 연기기 미디 편적이야 말이잖아 뭐 내주 되게 말아 뭐 내주 어디 손인자 다 간다 오도 젠다 디바교 그랬어 오도 다시 삼바지고 대체비나 상계 고방 두야 다가래 상계 고방 모두비네 알레 코발람사 상계 고발람사 도마도비네 코발네네 데네 대바신도야 어디 연구했어 어도 섹터잖아
Again, it says in the Bodhisattva, there's one verse that says that until we're able to if we're not able to exchange self and others, then not only will enlightenment be impossible. I mean, of course, enlightenment will be impossible, but even while you're in cyclic existence, you will experience no happiness. So this is talking about how important it is to meditate on loving kindness and compassion to generate those qualities. And here it's talking about how to do it by way of equalizing, exchanging self and others, which means recognizing that up to now, we've done nothing but strive for our own happiness without caring about others. And so when we talk about equalizing, exchanging self and others, it means switching those attitudes. So it doesn't simply mean, you know, I'm going to become others are going to become me. It means switching the attitude of caring mainly about oneself to caring mainly about others. And instead of neglecting oneself, then, you know, neglecting others, neglecting oneself, by thinking of the benefits, by thinking about the benefits of caring for others and putting others first. So this is really, you know, important. You know, everything really becomes very different when you have loving kindness and great compassion like this. And when you have that, when through thinking in that way, you're able to switch the self and others, then enlightenment becomes possible. And even if you don't achieve enlightenment, in other words, even, you know, up until you achieve enlightenment, while you're still in cyclic existence, you'll experience nothing but happiness. No.
yang ta tawa shep yang ta tawa ta yone men de o tele ya yang ta tawa chu ko bi kimzen che yang ta tawa ngwe shep ta te sa jin yima de to jina chena da be ke ju de ji de bi sa jin ga yu san ta de yima de to ta ra ma le.
Anyway, so we move on to the third point, which is the third of the three principal aspects of the path, which is the correct view. And this also talks about the reason for generating, the reason we need to have that kind of wisdom, and then it talks about how to develop that wisdom. There should be more outlines than that, really, but here, according to this explanation, this commentary, there are these 2 points. No.
내로 또 백시를 면대나 민주 전주선은 검체가 세베 잡아주고 민네베 티실 땡데도 터베스 무지지.
No. So what it says first is, without the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, even though you have generated renunciation in the mind of enlightenment, you cannot cut the root cause of circling. Therefore, attempt the method to realize dependent arising. No.
What? This one. So now the Nelu only we need to insert what the matter wina. Some tongue yes, what the matter wina. And it under the one shag, Nijun that changes some teaching. Any pig Casati con David, Tigmar, Urim Kazakone, teaching go Tigmaris. Chazan, Yiji Mijig, any chug Nelu Tobat, all that Digana. Nijun that changes some tea, the Yiji Mijig body. Take on catch should be. 아니 오 쭉 내려도 받고 스타디 듣고 그랬었는데 다 될래야 대실 땡데도 배탈 배송 다디 믹스리 땡데도 배탈 배송.
Yeah, so what this is saying is that if you haven't realized the ultimate reality of all phenomena, the ultimate reality of everything, in other words, which means if you haven't realized emptiness, just meditating on renunciation and bodhicitta, no matter how long you practice those for, no matter how long you meditate on those for, it's not enough. You definitely need the view, in other words, the realization of emptiness. And so that's why the Jé Rinpoché says something which is really quite special here. He says, for that reason, you need to realize dependent arising. No.
Oh yeah. Oh. Sibe 잡아주면 siba 말하서 커봐. 오 커봐를 타다보도 내야지. 내 동네 망고냐야 가르쳐 버렸으나. 아니. 오, 쭉 내로 뭐 내주미 심의 인자. 딘중 된다는 말씀이 인자 쳐 버렸어. 그 소인 오다 코발에 타 땡게 대와 터발라 이지 민지기 오 디네단티 이 코베 잡아테 봐 빵고 코베 잡아 던좀 몽바티 디 가레 방고르스나 코데 몽데이 미시바 땡데게 던다 미시바 땡데 동베 던바 오디션 디시에서나 코방가루 제가 오 민주회 제가 대체 경제 된데서 개천부 시우송 인자 대체 아니 땡데도 왜 탈베스 데레 지난번에 동의도 왜 탈베스 와시 요리디 동의도 왜 탈베스 동만이 또 리디 이나야 팀마송 가르스나 나랑서 남배나라 준다 다시 열어 지라마원 도대와 안데니아 샘자바 우메나 우머랑 줘봐 세텐데 요래 제가 디게 그 동만이 시게 열디 뭐 니수티 송투요 제가 디데마 동만이 선디 마송체 디지 땡데도 왜 탈베스 땡데 오 어디서 터잖아
So it says you cannot cut the root cause of circling. In other words, you cannot cut the root cause of samsara. So what this means is that up till now, we've experienced nothing but suffering, and all of this has been because of not understanding emptiness, because of not understanding dependent arising. And if we want to achieve lasting happiness, then we definitely need to realize emptiness and dependent arising, because in that way we'll be able to bring a halt to cyclic existence. So it's really very important. So I want to draw your attention to what it says on the last line. It says you need to realize dependent arising. So really what it should be saying is, therefore attempt the method to realize emptiness, but it doesn't say that. It says attempt the method to realize dependent arising. And this doesn't mean to say that you don't need to realize emptiness. You do need to realize emptiness, but also in order to realize emptiness, you need to realize and understand dependent arising. And you can understand why if you consider that we have four schools of tenets, the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamika, and all of them talk about emptiness, but they don't really understand emptiness because they don't have a real understanding of dependent arising. So if you understand dependent arising properly, then you'll be able to get the realization of emptiness. No.
Yeah. What is it? That Mente Sandy. Any Karasana Gomuludu teacher. Inju Rigwandi, Bangi Tawata Javages. Mente Sati Rigwati. Or D. Bangi Tawata, Moy Nizu Koba, not Koya, Zawata Bangbo, Alacham. Sendagara, that the Kone is simple Quachavanshi. Not some Tente Ganelach, Tente or Tente to this one is better Kuyangbo. Any Taganashi, Chambat Zavachewa, they so Tente to work. Oh, Pokares and Ranga did do some or the Tagas Jomare, turn it over in the Insa, Tente the Quavina, and Samba Samboke at Kangatonic, Be Kuyangbo. In the single chesa, then decided they catch somebody.
Now, so let's talk about the dependent arising. Now, Nagarjuna in his teachings, he says that through the understanding of dependent arising, through that reasoning, if you use dependent arising as the reason, then you'll be able to eliminate all mistaken views. So actually, through the understanding of dependent arising, you're able to achieve liberation. But even besides that, even during this life, without even having achieved liberation, during this life, through reflecting on dependent arising, your mind becomes more open and more relaxed, and it becomes a method for developing a good heart. No.
No, yeah. What is it? Oh, 재상 완도 비게 추기 내로 뭐이 내주 두야래야 아니 땡지 임베 금증 두야디 휴지 개심 버 디가르스나 지당 리고 망고 요래 지들을 소버리고 망고 요래 요래디 디나네 조디 리베 개고 땡지 땡지스 최탐제 라왕고 요마래 가르스나 땡지라 봐 땡지 상은 단디서 봐 라왕고 매봐 땡지 두바 임바지 땡지 두바 인자 땡지 임바 어디고 배 땡지 동바 땡지 통다 과야 어디 휴지 내가 같이 모래 뒤송단 제가 땡지 임이 칠송 땡지 동바 다 베스.
And meditating on dependent arising is the best way to be able to understand the ultimate nature of things, the ultimate reality of things. So there are many different reasons that one could use to establish that everything is empty, such as the reasoning of being free of one and many. And yet amongst all of those, the one which is referred to as the king of reasons for proving emptiness is the reasoning of dependent arising. So when you're using dependent arising as a reason for understanding emptiness, then you come to see the equivalence of emptiness and dependent arising, that if something is empty, it has to be dependent arising. If it's dependent arising means it depends upon others, therefore it's not independent, therefore it has to be empty.
땡지 틀이야 낭바 이나 상면 땡지 캘링게 이나야 다 땡지 틀이야 타라요버디 타라요 세상디 장으로 지 세브 송나서 네마 가서래다 사시직지마 디송도 잡아 디세브 송소 뭐게티 마슈인다 땡지 남샤들 내가 숨송나서
All Buddhists accept dependent arising. In other words, all of the Buddhist philosophical systems, they all accept dependent arising. But dependent arising can be understood on different levels. So it can be understood on a more superficial level or simpler level, or it can be understood on a much deeper and more profound level, much more subtle level. So His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, has explained about these different levels of dependent arising during his commentary on Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to the fundamental wisdom, Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. And so I want to explain dependent arising using His Holiness's explanation.
줍다 공워기 남거다 남거 줍다 공워기 땡지 조주텔로 거바타라 숨요레스.
When we look at the different systems of Buddhist tenets, then we can understand three different ways in which dependent arising can be understood now.
Voilà, so what is it? That didn't so. Tenzin Java Joma Telaya, and Gugina, good again, Gudigoda, Gugina Dene Chomadi, Dujeg Tendes. Yes, some that test some shit, Muamabe Dujins, or that did not do to the Wama, Chirama was on Dotti Kelly. 지단다 관계 캘링그리 이내야 디 예제를 캘링 투구야 말해 지단마 어디 엄마 징거려 봐 뭐버 때문에 이동 그렇지 뇌지 당고티 어디 고바라바 인스 덴데 콘도 고발해야 돼 고바라바티 덴데 고바라바티 샤시 주주티
He taught that one of the levels of dependent arising, which is the most superficial one, is the way it is to do with the way that compounded phenomena depend upon causes and conditions, and so that kind of dependent arising is called the dependent arising of compounded phenomena. And so this is something that even those realists, or in other words, proponents of truly existent things, truly existent functioning things, all accept. So that means, even the Vaibhashikas and the Sutrantikas accept that kind of dependent arising. No.
Oh yeah, that's a cover what the consequence the did Gulen Devuchuma or Devu Guletemba, what in this month or Takan Sheza Duja Dumaching, Dumachel Tende Kelly to you. What is not the Tinde cover the cover up.
So for them, dependent arising only applies to compounded phenomena, not to permanent phenomena, not to non-compounded phenomena. And so, in other words, for them, dependent arising only has the connotation of results depending upon their causes. No.
Anybody, Chashela, Deni, charging to us. Chashetaman, whoever, Chashet is Mangutum, charging stick together, or Chashet then charging to us. Or Tindek tended Takada, Dujet, Dumache, Tamjet, and Tende Shayati, Tilishagi, or that is all Rangive to Rangiva. Uma Rangive, or that did any Tende cover up, was a coventing queens.
Then there's another way it can be understood, which is in terms of the possessor of parts and the parts that it possesses. So the possessor of the parts depends upon the parts. So this is something the Svatantrikas accept. So, in the middle way schools, you have the Svatantrikas and the Prasangikas. So the Svatantrikas accept that. And that's the middling level of dependent arising. No.
That's it. That didn't Tanya wang some Tanya pa Minda Tanya wang some Tanya Dene some Shella Dene, that Shella Dene tap, or Tinde the Shilla Dene, Tubach Kero, the Shilla Dene, big pa, Tabach, Tanya tap, or the Tinde di, or the Dendi di. Anyway, or that intended di, Tinde Tamo is on Cobatamo.
Then there's of these three, the one which is the most subtle is the dependent arising, which refers to the way in which everything is imputed depending upon its basis of imputation through the force of conventions and terms. In other words, depending upon conventions and terms. No.
Oh yeah. But the Tindersons sa. Oh, the Shilla then because that part down to the Jorba, or the deep Tindersons at the bed Caresana. The Shilla then years at Caresana. Then a Pumbota Pumboto Shadro, Perusana. Pumbe the Shilla then any Della Pumba Shetani and Pumbasa Tubares. Oh, Pumbas Tubatans. Oh, teacher. That
No.
Pumbe Pumba Pig Pumbe Delshitla Pumba said Tanya Wang done. What is yours? The mother, oh, Kora Rangita Pig Rawang to it in the Mari, or Tanya Wang. The Shavsiles. Delshit want to a mess.
So this is talking about the way in which things are imputed from the side of the mind, or depending upon the basis of imputation through convention. So they exist through imputation by the conventions. Okay, so if we look at it in terms of a concrete example, a vase, for example, then that is imputed depending upon its basis. And how it comes to be, what is it that imputes it is the conventions. Conventions are what do the imputing or the projecting. What that means is that the vase doesn't come to be a vase independently through its own force, but rather through the force of conventions. No.
Oda tindis because neru zena mares mata maje tagwang patagas pa da shabjeres wang shabo that tindi that thank you with the ko
so what he points out is that what His Holiness points out in his explanation is that it's that things are merely imputed through the force of conventions. When we search for them, even if we search for them in the conceptual mind that does the labeling or the imputation, whether it's just oneself or someone else or 100 other people, you can't find that object. Rather, it's merely imputed through the force of conception. So this is the most subtle kind of dependent arising, and this is the way that the Prasangikas understand it. This is unique to them. No.
della gosta 되게 고스그런 거.
No.
이게 사주한테 강바스그러 봐. 강바. 대 뭐다 강바다고 균질 각게 붙여줘야 돼. 당고 토마 아니 뭐다 강바스타샤나 다주 내 강바스 단 골주준 내 강바. 나 그러 봐. 어디래 마도 오 토마 두스 되게 좀 따도 돼. 균질 가야만 두스타샤.
No. Yeah, so yeah, so to go into this idea of how things are mere imputations from the side of or through the force of conceptions and conventions and so on. If you think about it, this thing here that we call head, right? In Tibetan they call go, so in English we call head, and then we've got our legs, so we call that leg. But in the beginning, it didn't have to be called head, and it didn't have to be called leg. In the beginning, it would have been perfectly acceptable to use the word leg to refer to what we call a head, and to use the word head to refer to what we these days now call our leg. There's not even there's nothing at all about the head that makes it obligatory right from the beginning to call it head and or to call the leg. It's just something that occurred to the person who first gave it that name. No.
다가난시 가와이네 아니 사스타과 김자 사다 도다 슈다 싱스타바 김지 가게야마 아 스피게 다산 다가나 두대로 어디 파다선사도 뭐인지.
Likewise, what we call when we point downwards and say that's the ground, there's a stone, wood, this is water. Right from the they didn't have to be called that right from the beginning. There's nothing about them that makes it so they had to be called that. They're merely imputed from the side of the the conventions. No.
뭐야 어디서 제가 다 코피게 강다버디 다서디 컨텐도 가와다도 제비나 니야요 막 그게 경제하게요 또 스파다샤마도 배나 미를 찍으려 치링 스타일이나 민간도 되게 치링 스타일로 치링 그 치링부 되게 요즘에요 막 그 치팅 치링다고 치링 줘봐라 얘네 미 찍을 뜻이 다요나 그 뜻이 이미 되게요 막 다가 스타샤 그 뜻이 이게 경제요 막 드라마 시즌 뜻이 다신 뜻이 어도세 근데 그래도 니야요
No. What's been imputed, if you were to look for it in its base of imputation or anywhere, you wouldn't be able to find it. There's no reason why it had to be called by that name. Like when we're giving somebody a name, so we have this this name in Tibetan, Tsering. So actually, Tsering means long life. Long life. But it's not necessarily the case that the person who's called Tsering is going to have a long life. So it's not because they're going to have a long life that they're called Tsering. And likewise, we have the name Tashi, which we could say in English means auspicious. So just because the person's be called Tashi, it's not necessarily the case that they're going to be auspicious. They could be very inauspicious as a person. No.
아니 맞아 못달래야 이거 스타일 타고 꼭 한것이 강바디 조금 쉬위 도왔을 때라고 그러봐 강바도 모터 스타일 타서 내 모터 나가를 차차 봐 그러봐 나가는 시 까바당 그래서 나가 김제가가 매웠다 나가 다시야 모두 파다상사 두세
Likewise, we could have the what we call a car could have been called a house, and then we'd be saying, "Oh, look, my house is driving very fast, is moving very fast." So it's like that with everything, isn't it? So it's just imputation by the mind. No.
This one.
No.
Oh yeah. What is it? What is it? 간다. 아니. 찍을 땐 찍어봐. 어디 가서 댄제 사디 차시에 때는 사진 줘봐. 다 간다. 이게 가서 오래. 꼭 될 때는 뒤줘봐. 다 간다. 뒤제 뒤마체 탐제 될 때는 뒤에 샤버래. 아니 뒤마체 이네 토리 가서 매봐. 나가 이는 나가 또 위는 과야 매봐 다가. 아니 난거 스타 샤버봐. 만도 그 젠이야 개요. 다든 젠 가와다서 가와도 내로 제빈 니야요. 매봐 다가 전한테 맞어.
As I mentioned, the possessor of the parts depends upon the parts, and so really this is something that applies to everything, whether it's a compounder phenomena or a non-compounder phenomena. Everything depends upon its parts. Everything depends upon its base of imputation. So, like for example, in the case of space. So space is something which is merely imputed on its basis, which is the mere absence of tangibility or obstructiveness. So it's merely imputed on that. What that means is, if you were to look in the base of imputation, you won't be able to find it anywhere. No.
What is it? What that being gomblulu this one can't 띵중 뭐이베 청가여봐 뭐이봐 디지 동과 뭐이베 청가여봐 뭐이노스 어디 도송을 그래서나 유세 탐지 매는 다로 유세 탐지 띵중을 땡제레스 그 띵중을 청가여봐 직장여 말스 띵중 선자 그 때는 여기 인상 라왕가 여 말 라왕 쪽에 저 동바래 라왕 쪽에 동바 어다 유세 동바 띵중을 아니 어디 라왕 매부터 동바스 그래 띵이 뭐 동바다 띵중이 뭐 띵겨 매봐 뭐지 이래서
Nagarjuna teaches in his fundamental wisdom that since there is nothing at all which isn't a dependent arising, therefore nothing at all which is not empty. What this means is that absolutely everything is a dependent arising. There's nothing which isn't a dependent arising. Everything is a dependent arising. And so there is nothing which is independent. In other words, everything is empty of being independent. So that's, dependent arising and empty. And we can see from this that empty and dependent arising, actually, they're not contradictory. It's not like they're completely opposite. It's got to be one or the other. They're not contradictory at all. And in fact, they are ngojik, so one entity. No.
Any Toma to sta Tsani, di Tagaranta, Kasure. Tanyet Katavin, Tagaranta, Tanyet Chabre, Yonzo Tata, Tagaran, Denke Tarva, Denke Tsani, and Kotagaran, di Tubere, Benarochin, Michilia, Tashis, Tavian, Jimzi Kagayama, the Tashtanaku, di Tashis. Oh, Tatelia, Chis, the Denke Sarva, Denke San Chis, and it's Tagas, Tundus Lana, the Tundu Chaya Mari. Tundu Lands and Langamari, the Karesana, Tundu Sigio Mari. The Tashitava, all those tiny big tomatoes. Then they take her.
No. So in the beginning, the thing is labeled. And from then on, it's established as that. So for example, to give you an idea of what I mean by that, in the beginning, that person didn't have to be called Tashi. But once they've been given the name Tashi, once they've been labeled Tashi, then they're Tashi. And afterwards, if somebody would call them Dundrup, then we'd have to say, that's not Dundrup, that's Tashi. So that's how it works. No.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Shasha. That didn't mind the shoe, the shoe, the never there, Tabango shed, there's some dish. Oh, Tabango, because Tawa Tamamuchi, Tawa Gully give it, says it. Tawe Kajush, water to Sisha. There's some jones.
Gonna do somebody.
Somebody did Tawe Kaju.
Kaju now.
Give it our soda.
Yeah, so now for actually explaining the view, there are 3 points. First of all, there is the actual explanation of the view. Then the second one is an explanation of how to generate that view, to develop that view in your continuum. And then thirdly, there are the attributes, let's say, of the attributes of the view. And here, of course, we're talking about the Prasangika view, right? No.
That's what Kanshi Kwande Chona, Tamji, Gulen, Lua Metonshi. Miguel Teso, Kanyigun, Shina, Tennis Sanjaki, the Lama shoes.
And so for the first thing, it says showing the right view. Then it's got the 10 there. So I don't know, verse 10. One who sees the cause and effect of all phenomena of both cyclic existence and the state beyond sorrow as forever unbetraying, and for whom any object trusted in by the grasping mind has completely disappeared, has at that time entered the path pleasing the Buddhas.
Oh yeah. What is Adi Kangshi Sadi Tarvatundoni Sundachine? Oh, Kangshi. Oh, that D turn you has a Kangshi. Quande Chena Tamjis, Tandangarazo, Korvata, Yangeli Deva, Tavasi Niorva, or D. Yeze Tamji, Chena Tamjis. No.
No. when it says one who sees, so when it says one, that's talking about, you know, one who is seeking liberation, wants to achieve liberation. It says one who sees the causes and effects of all phenomena of both cyclic existence and the state beyond sorrow, in other words, nirvana. So that's saying, in other words, you know, all phenomena, you know, one who sees the cause and effect of all phenomena. No.
군대 남에 루아 매 통신스. 군대 그래서나 아니 khobar gwene nyomo cho da namjang cho ni yo denba xi na la gwene nyomo cho jixia o namjang cho jixia ni ta di ye da gwene nyomo cho de khares na ani kharsa ta tukti khares na 동이 된바도 군준 된바 쓰기도 와 o de song yi ma ani gwene nyomo cho de khares na o nyomo ta khares na khasa ta 군중 대바다 녀모 왔다. 내 군중 얘기 화바티 용 그랬어. 로바 켜네요. 말 켜. 어디 규텔 때네. 디 화바. 동에디 용아체. 남자 초사디. 다 미게 가르스 람데 땅 거든 시작도 와. 남자 초 가르스는 다 남자 초 알리 디 마시비나. 벤데 동배 통다디 공배이나. 디 냠니 샤비나 타바도 그랬어. 로바 켜네요 말했어. 군대 남의 루어매 통신스.
And it goes on to say, forever unbetraying. Okay, forever unbetraying. I mean, we could say, you know, never betrays. They never betray. What that means is, so this is talking actually about what we call with the four truths, you've got two truths which are on the afflicted side, and two truths which are on the pure side. So in the case of the two truths on the afflicted side, which means the truth of suffering and the truth of the origin, the origin refers to karma and the mental afflictions. So those two, without betraying, you know, in other words, will always lead to the truth of suffering. The truth of the origin, which is the karma, the mental afflictions, always leads to the truth of suffering, and that never deceives, or that never betrays. And betrays maybe not the right word, but anyway, that's always the case. So it's like certain that's the case. Then on the pure side, you've got the truth of cessation and the truth of the path. And what this means is, when it says, you know, forever unbetraying, what it means is that you will never be deceived by the meditation on emptiness. It's definitely going to lead to liberation. No.
What didn't the Miguel testo can principal tiene Saggezza per la shoes. Otre. Ta Maranzo Kawa Kiadi, Tanzi Mari Momba Silva, Mari Momba. O della Mariba, Tanziti, and Migbeteso. Can you go shows? Tanzingi, you miss a Chunimang. 비게 가르선다 대바토스요. 대바토 현 매니질 진진대요. 오 단지게 미베 유데 아니 베시바 가르서 버렸잖아. 그 땡지 땡네 투바레 라왕게 현이요 말스. 미베티 단지 가르선 라왕 투바시요. 진디요 봐. 오다 디 라왕 투바 매와티 신소나 미베테소. 미베테소 유디 라왕 투바 군진대. 티파 땡들든 하고 뭐 이제 매번 신소나 운시 왔어. 자원의 매딩이 하고서나 되는 Saggezza la shoes. What Saggezza us. Te sure.
Okay, so it says for one whom any object trusted in by the grasping mind has completely disappeared. So what this is talking about is the mind of ignorance, which sometimes we can call something like confusion or delusion. Anyway, we're talking about this the self-grasping mind, the mind grasping at a self. So what it grasps is something which actually has never existed, which is a self that exists from its own side. And what makes that vanish, what makes that vanish, completely disappear is what it says in the text. Okay, so completely disappear is the understanding of the emptiness of existing from its own side. So somebody who has that kind of understanding, in other words, the understanding that nothing exists from its own side, has led to the complete disappearance in the object trusted in by the grasping at a self, and also understands the unbetraying nature of the phenomenon of cyclic existence and nirvana. That person has entered into the path pleasing the Buddhas. No.
Just not all the channel. Oh, I can't. Any Mongba be Mari was done. The Luba, nigga, got in the training to Zin Dever Mato, Sangulana, Shuya, some Ranshin go, Mongba shoot to Emma, who Lubu did it. Oh, Sanguran Shinty, Moynizu, Rawang Meva, only be worse episode. Takanda, who did it, take her Mongba did. But we get deep devati, Mishivati, any Moynizu or Tinju Tandati, go condition door, because Java said Devina, Uncle Mongo Marie with never channel. The Benarugina, Mumba, the Chamber Jubina, tell the Nawalena, you may wear Levina, Mumba Castle never take Marwa. Nawalena, Mumba take Marwa. Chetang around some drifting in Momba, the Nawa, the Tinju that because a Nelu top of the Chuna, take Marco, Momba the Marie, Shito, what did you want to?
So the thing is that this mind of ignorance that grasps the things as existing from their own side is actually adventitious. It's something temporary. In other words, it's not something which is a fixed feature of the mind. It's something which obscures the mind, but only temporarily. And if you analyze, then if you use rational, reasoning, you'll be able to completely eliminate that ignorance. You'll make it completely non-existent. And this is very much like, no matter how dark it is, once the sun rises, once there's the light of the sun, then that darkness won't remain, right? So in the same way, when you have the understanding of the ultimate nature of things, how nothing exists from its own side, then the darkness of that ignorance will vanish. No.
What is an teacher? Well, teacher, Takada, then the Kachambori, Jundayina, good man of Jewu Marva, could Jewu Tamje, Julet Dever. But any Jewu di, any correct Julet Dever, Julet customer, duty Jewu Dever, Jewu di is a delicate, Simon Slagova, Chitaina, what did it change? Oh, what this change, Devil, Kada, and to do. What the decision for it. Aranzo big young is at Yakota Tuja Sandy, simply doing any Dugu doing Yagasha, till a Yagashi and Yanti Duchan, who do shall, but in this model, Korawank, Betty Yawini Yawi Chitan, to win to Gioma. Just a dish of Tony, Yang Shama. Ringdong said to the kind of Chibber, what Chile doing Chishamado, Korawanki, Ramayana. Any cocaine, go Government, what in the
dependent arising is really very important. So we've already thought about how results depend upon their causes, but actually also causes depend upon their results, because something is posited as a cause relative to producing a result, relative to having a result. In the same way that when we talk about good and bad, we talk about, they're not absolute. They're also not absolute. We talk about something being good relative to something worse than it. We talk about something being bad relative to something which is better. And so they don't exist independently. They exist relatively. In the same way also long and short. You posit something as long relative to something shorter than it, something as short relative to something longer than it. No.
semje koba ne di mishi mongbe wangi nebi inza ani dana di tende tongwe to di shebi na ani koba ta luwa dile sangye gebe lamus what is it.
And when it says such a person has at that time entered the path pleasing the Buddhas, what that means is that the Buddha, the very reason for Buddha coming into the world was not being able to bear the suffering of sentient beings and wanting to liberate them, wanting to bring them to the state of liberation. And why they are in samsara, why they haven't achieved liberation, is because of their own self-grasping. So when somebody is able to develop the wisdom that removes that self-grasping, then the Buddha is going to be pleased. No.
아니 타와 캐나조 토마토 캐나조 가래스 지난 상계 잡아 요도 상계 차가 야게요 말봐 어디 손자 타와 라나라를 셔 있어도 손.
Now what's very important here is that the Buddha himself said, I've shown you the path to liberation. Whether you achieve liberation or not, that depends upon you. So the Buddha was saying he can't just lead you to place you in liberation. The way you achieve liberation is through your own practice. No.
무엇은 다디 워팅다. 오 단이번 낭도 소소즈는 계획 공부만 또 버티듯이. 나와 된지 루아 내버도 동부 캘린테를 고번이. 고번이 있어. 지수 소소 나와 디스도 동도 특별 공부 또 보면서.
Then the next point, actually, this is very useful. It shows it in the title for the next verse, verse 11. So it says the definition of not having completed the analysis of the right view. So it says if the appearance of dependent relation, which is unbetraying, is accepted separately from emptiness, as long as they are seen as separate, then one has still not realized the Buddha's intent. No.
뭐야 어디지? 어디 가르스나 나와 된지 루아 내와 당스. 어다 나와 된지 대당. 동바 캐린 잡았어. 또 어디 또디 오 저기 내로 동바 이부디 고바수시네. 딱 간다. 유래 대부 총월에 어다 레 기딜렌 대부 디도 중을 때도 템바 땡냐 템바 초바레스 땡제 말에세 비게 오다가 땡제 말씀이다 고 가레스나 라왕 초바레스 두스케네 동바니사디 라왕 초베 동바디 땡제 뭐이면서 베트 카가시 켈레나 비게 낭동 베트 카가 켈렌도나 지수수 나와 디스도 드베 공부도 하면서 我应该是现有嘛的说，特别广告到有嘛的是。
So if the appearance of dependent relation, which is unbetrained, is accepted separately from emptiness, what this means is that if your understanding of the dependent nature of things and their empty nature is like two completely separate, which means, for example, thinking that the causes leading to results, which is on the side of appearances. So that's okay, that's the things occur dependently. And the reason for that is because they do, they do exist from their own side. But then when you think about emptiness, so emptiness means empty of existing from its own side. So then that means that would mean that they don't exist at all. So in other words, this is a way in which you can have completely different, understand those two, dependent arising emptiness, completely different. No.
Oh yeah, that's it. Oh, that kanda, the kobati. Oh, that. Chunelu duya, that big kobatelia. Ribbon moyo, ribbon nangi, denji ribbon sadina, and big person, Taja tiny minons. Tima imbeche. We need to be cockadisto zen. Chunman, Diana Cunimindus, Shezaforman, Duchena, Duce. That caressana, Yuna, Tembatu, Navena Shen to the home. Or do says it in this, telling you, this Yabina. Nang don't eat the kaka bed Kelena, but Sarando Kelena, and to be congotoy, when is the shame of Maris. Caressana, that caressana. Chito just to Horva. So Tombao, Tombani, Suso, Sule, and Tomani Zuni, Kada, or to Movatil Dobatade. What did the Shimbo, the Mashimba Chese, Kaka in the Covalendona, and to be congotoy, Maris Santos.
So as I mentioned before, there are many different reasons that can be used for understanding how things are empty, how they don't exist from their own side. And so, as I mentioned, the main one is dependent arising, because when you use the reasoning of being a dependent arising to prove that things are empty, then you naturally avoid the two extremes. In other words, the extreme of permanence and the nihilist extreme. You avoid both of those. And so here what it's talking about is those philosophers who think that if something exists, it has to be truly existent. And therefore, and then if you say emptiness means the emptiness of a true existence, then obviously they have completely different understanding of what it means to be empty and what it means to be a dependent arising. So actually how we need to understand it can be, we can see from the 4 points that come up in the Heart Sutra in relation to form, where it says form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, form is not other than emptiness. So what those 4 lines are teaching, those 4 statements are teaching, is that the two truths are one entity and only nominally different, literally, different isolates, or nominally different. In other words, the dependent nature of things and their empty nature, these are actually the same entity. They're nominally different, but they're the same entity. They're one entity. No.
Yeah. But they can't Tomba Kelly Tabasai. What the Kelly Tabasati? Tomba Nisadi Kuni. Kelly Mekaye, Kake, Mojume, in this city of Mari, and the Tomba Kelly Tabasandi. Any Kunzo, Jessa, Shit Kunzo, Kunzo, Pig, Kunzo in Atakanda Pig, Rita Kunzo sister, or Pig Java Cheni, Tonda Devata, Junelu Musum Pig, Sixona, Timor Kunzo called Cladu. What tell ya Kelly? Oh, Kelly Mevas, Kunzo Kayanta. Tonda the Musu Sibi Simonia, Kunzo Siki Omar. What else? Did
here when it says, if the appearance of dependent arising is accepted separate from emptiness, I can't see that here. Yeah, so there should be a phrase here, which I can't see in the English. It talks about being free of assertions. So if the appearance of dependent relation, which is unbetraying, is accepted separately from emptiness, and as long as they're seen as separate, then one has still not realized the Buddha's intent. Yeah, okay. So anyway, in this verse, there should be a phrase that talks about the free from assertions, killing. So free from assertions, and what it refers to is the fact that when you have a direct perception of emptiness, for that mind, we could say from the perspective of that mind, there are no conventional phenomena. So free from assertions refers to that. No. And then it's the next verse talks about the definition of having completed the analysis of the right view. And it says, if these two realizations are happening simultaneously without alternation, and from merely seeing dependent relation as completely unbetraying, the definite ascertainment comes that completely destroys the way all objects are apprehended as truly existent. At that time, the analysis of the ultimate view is complete. No.
제바체 디리체디 간 되네 뒤 남식 제서 다 간다 디리 제발 때네 아니 가서 그래 이게 네 탐정 뭐도 똥 봐지 봐 비게 라마 좀 내가 임발라 아니야 딜레 이 디리 좀 땡디 여봐 땡디 어디에 차용 그래서는 낭동이 뭐지 즉 비게 삼단에 이게 가다 제바체니 띵이도 잡아 직수돼 또뭐니 삼단도 라왕가 매와 삼단도 아니 신나 때네 여바디 롱치 차이 신나 때네 여바 땡데 삼단도 라왕가 매와 어디니 뭐디 직도 직스빙 겨와 매바세 디리 어디 주나 이 유시인지나 그진 대세 따외 잡아서 봐라서 다도 따외 잡아서 대한 수행을 강의요 강의 쓴다 지금 매라면다요.
No. Yeah, what this is talking about then is that if you keep reflecting on and analyzing, investigating dependent arising and emptiness, then eventually you'll reach the point where the two ideas appear to you to fit together very well. In other words, what we've been talking about, dependent arising and emptiness, another way of putting it is appearances and emptiness. So in other words, what this means is that when you think of emptiness, when you think of something being empty, then you're thinking it doesn't exist independently. Empty means empty of being of independent existence. So if it's empty of independent existence, that means that it's dependent. And so, in other words, thinking about emptiness naturally takes you to the dependent nature of the thing. And then when you think about the dependent nature of an object, you think about how it's a dependent arising, then that very naturally takes you to thinking, therefore, the thing doesn't exist independently. It's empty of existing independently. So it's talking about that then, reaching the point where those two fit together very well for you. And then when it says at that time the analysis of the ultimate view is complete, this is can be understood in two ways. No.
뭐야 어디서 답이지 드립니다. 니시 이게 지난 그 신앙스타 가래서나 아니 이게 가서래. 나와 땡데들 비게 내가 내용도 잠바 아니 동바 오 라고 저 동바들 예시 한게 되나 어디 딘데 주나 다베 잡아 줘서 다 딜라잉 단데 야 딘데 요 잡아 소스나 맨다면도 다디 가르스나 따와 또나 아니 다베 잡아 줘서 년도 야 따와 무슨 또 차니 아니 이게 야 그따위 잡아줘야 다 잡아줘서 그래서는 럼리난 셰빈 디리스도 아니 이게 가사 따바 치마치신 무슨 또 차니 또 사회 강사를 아니 이게 가사 오다 딘데 나와 이게 덴데 띵게 요한테 배 가다 셈띵 랑 셈띵네 아니 이게 가사 셈띵네 뭐네 타는 배 예시를 깨는데 어디는 메테오 매워 딘디 준 안에 잡아줘 버렸어. 수만도디 consequence 준비 딘디 시카나서 페이지 다가 입니다. 딩에다 len 세브나 쉬마신.
No. Yeah. Rimshi konta de nibadi yangshi surana.
니버디 lamdir 나리야. 따봉 또 차베 강사한테 시샤다. 쟤네 아니 이게 다 유대 비게 가르스는 예시도 동발에 삼단데 아니 인중 이게 그사 나와 야 내가 한게 있잖아요. 나와 땡데들 삼 비게 디제도 아니 이게 라마트가 동나데 받에 예시 백견 예시 견 어때야 안데 미도에 내가 뭐에 니집에 다 가서래 샘띵네 비 그래서 어디다 딘디스 미도에 내가 뭐에 집에 딘디스 다가라 딘디스 주나 미도에 내가 송샤다 왜 어디를 주나 아니 따왜 잡아 줘 버려
No.
물은 이제 어디 딘디스 가나서
No.
나한테 말면 나면요
And when it talks about the definite ascertainment, so this is talking about understanding how, having this kind of like natural understanding that if something is dependent arising, then it has to be empty. So actually, as I mentioned, there are different ways in which this can be explained. This point, when you've understood naturally how, if something is dependent arising, it has to be empty. If it's empty, it has to be dependent arising. It says, at that time, the analysis of the view is complete. So what I'm saying is that there are some who say that when you've realized emptiness, your understanding of the view is complete. Then there are others who say that it's when you have a direct realization of emptiness that your understanding of the view is complete. And the reason for this, so this is something I've understood from listening to His Holiness teaching, the Dalai Lama. So he mentions that in the Lam Rim teachings, after you've realized emptiness, then you have this particular insight into dependent arising. So after the meditation on emptiness, then when you see the various dependent arising phenomena, the appearance, the appearing phenomena, conventional phenomena, when they appear to you, then you understand that they're appearing while at the same time being empty, and so you see no there's no awkwardness with that. It seems quite natural that they're empty and yet at the same time they're appearing, and that's when the view has been when you've completed the view. No. No. Then there's the next point, verse 13, where it says the particular special qualities of the Prasangika view. Furthermore, appearance eliminates the extreme of existence, and emptiness eliminates the extreme of non-existence. If you realize how emptiness manifests in the manner of cause and effect, then you're not captivated by wrong notions holding extreme views. No.
That's all. 어떠신다 디레. 야, 디 믹스 캐주 신다. 캐주 그랬습니다. 캐주 송래. 나왜 신 나왜 여다 세보다. 나왔으나 땡지 다 그랬으나 고 디가사다 여바시는 다 간다. 나왔으나 이게 구독 출신은 다 들이샤고로 나와 땡지. 나와 땡지 디 여다 세보. 나와 땡지 디 여다 세스. 땡지 삼을단데 삼아. 땡네 저거 이비 인사 여다 가르쳤으나 땡네 주스도 땡네 줘버렸어. 그 라왕가 여버들라 여다세. 땡네 줘버스. 어디 고발인데 땡네 줘버려. 제가 신나 맞대와 요 말이 라왕가 민두스제제. 디 고발인데 어디 여다세. 땡기벌마도 요 말. 대신 我가서 신다 땡데다 뒤도 땡데 세트고 말봐.
No.
You're the self.
No. For the let me scroll up a bit again. For this one, the particular special quality of the Prasangic view. So it talks here about the appearances and emptiness, right? So what it's saying, when it says appearances, it's talking about conventional phenomena. And so it's talking about the way in which, when you think about dependent arising in relation to conventional phenomena, that overcomes the extreme of existence, the yata, the extreme of existence. So what that means is, of course, it's quite natural that when you think about the dependent nature, that it would get rid of the extreme of non-existence. What it's saying, sorry, let me start again. What this is saying is, when you meditate on dependent arising, you're thinking about how the thing exists depending upon other things, how it exists relative to and in relation to other things, and therefore doesn't exist independently. So when you're thinking it doesn't exist independently, then that means that you're eliminating the extreme of existence. So this is unique to the Prasangika understanding of emptiness, that the dependent arising, understanding the dependent arising, you eliminate the extreme of existence. No.
What is it? In Dongwei meta session, Dongwei meta sesadi, Dongbasadi, in Rawang to the Dong, Rangsing Dong, Rawang Dong. The Kobater Rawang mess to Zamba, Chun mess Yama. Oh, Shena Tene, Yavatiku. Oh, Rawang mess is the Dongwei, meta se Mare, Rawang mess, and Shena Tene, Yavatiku. Oh, do check. Dongwei meta se.
And besides that, according to this system, emptiness dispels the extreme of non-existence. And what that means is that when you're reflecting on how something is empty, then you're thinking about how it's empty of independent existence, empty of existing by its own nature. And when you're thinking about that, then you know that you're so empty of it being independent because it's dependent. Therefore, it isn't totally non-existent. It has to exist. So, since your understanding of emptiness has brought you to the certainty that the thing must exist, so that means your understanding of emptiness has dispelled the extreme of non-existence, the nihilist extreme. No.
동방이 모든 레우샤의 수신은 통제 대비 종 동방이 있어. 최 탐지 라왕 여자 건가 라왕 쪽에 동방 임발라. 아니 규텔레 리부티 중국이 봐. 그 랑싱기 라왕가 매버리 이네 규강가다 라왕가 매버리 이네 규든 리부사데 남샤 쳐는 거예요. 규든 리부시 수신은 턴진 답에 좀 턴진 사디 딱다다 채다 쓰게 턴진 오 이게 유에서나 뭐에 내주베도 대바투 견 교화면이 라왕가 매서나 배 서버네 매리 시작하라네요 어디서 연구 말했어 이게 오다 딱 간다 우리 군대를 뭐다 생각 내려오다 던지 딸에 초면 교로 딱 간다 군대 용 말했어 이게 딱 돈도 군대 사지로 어디 용 말했어 진짜
Yeah, so here then it says, if you realize how emptiness manifests in the manner of cause and effect, then you're not captivated by wrong notions, holding extreme views. What this is talking about is thinking that when something is empty, it means that it doesn't exist independently, and yet within being empty and having no independent existence, this cause will lead to that result. And so this verse is talking about having reached understanding of emptiness and dependent arising such that you wouldn't be susceptible to grasping at the two extremes. So the two extremes are the extreme of non-existence, or the nihilist extreme, and the extreme of existence, or the eternalist extreme. So how you could end up with that kind of grasping at the permanent extreme, which is also described as the exaggeration or superimposition of something which doesn't exist on something which does. So how you would avoid that that kind of so you wouldn't, so you would think, you'd be thinking to yourself, well, if it doesn't exist independently, that means it doesn't exist at all. So that would be grasping at the nihilist extreme, and then thinking, well, if it does exist, it has to be truly existent, or it has to be inherently existent. So that would be grasping at the permanent extreme. So what this is saying is that when you've completed your understanding of emptiness, then you wouldn't fall prey of those two tendencies to deny or to exaggerate. In other words, you'd be free of those. That's another way of saying you'd be free of those two extremes. No.
Oh yeah. 다 죽었던 일이샤. 냠솔나바 그거도 좀봐 탈치 봤지. 다 냠솔나바 그거도 대라람기 조원 넘성 기내나 랑 지신 또 봤지. 엠바텐트 주도 또 걔네 땡긴 되면 유도 두시 부스.
No. Actually, I made a mistake there. I said you'll be free of the two extremes. Of course, you'll be free of the two extremes. But what Rinpoche was saying is you'll be free of grasping at the two extremes. And then we go on to the last verse, having gained definite ascertainment, advice on pursuing the practice. So it says, so there are 2 points to look at here. So anyway, the verse says, in this way, you realize exactly the vital points of the three principal aspects of the path. Resort to seeking solitude, generate the power of effort, and quickly accomplish your final goal, my child. No.
Thank you to ma tabachimbo sange gobanti mute dushis study or this one dushi pools gubere poosa data so sakopeng awatabo somebody that ding yamsle sama what is poo cheji
What this is saying is that having reached a clear and precise understanding of the three principal aspects on the basis of listening and reflecting, then if you meditate on them, then you will quickly achieve enlightenment. And when he says, quickly accomplish your final goal, my child, this is principally referring to his disciple, the Tsaku Ngaon Drapa, and it also refers to, anybody who, it refers to all of us. No.
Voilà, so this is that dine zomba tarchimbati dirisha. Sheba dinis tati mounted to be a long loss and to be Sakopun our trouble and numbers.
And if you scroll down a bit, then you'll see that in the colophon. So this is the part that was mentioned at the beginning, the concluding activities. So it says these teachings by the beggar of virtue, the seeker of virtue, Losang Dragpa, who has extensive listening, were composed as advice for the nephew of Bombo Ngaon Drapa. The Bombo Ngaon Drapa gi Pingya Tahochi the
that the Umbusad patching Nemachana, Conto Lumba the Pombo.
No. No.
In this the Lumbe Pombosungu.
No. So anyway, no. So it's for his Tsakungaon Drapa. When it says the Bumbo, actually Bumbo means like a leader. So this probably simply refers to the fact that his family were like chieftains in their region. No. No.
What is it? That the Karesana Mount the Begano, Takaresana, Jetani Chimbo de Chidan Turnlaya, and all turn one at Tane Sangere. Jizun Jambe and was to start to pay them. Inaya and a good telebe, some constant one at Tanegi. Order Pet Casore. Shanta Mera one at Tane, what did you get on Bamaboyore? What did she? The Yimba de Kongi and Kong Loma that save Tubure. Or Tago and the two Zebe to Sindama, start Conchigo Mare, Kongi, Zebe, Loma Tamjelma, the Dama di Lamgo Tobonamson di, and it Kunzenieti Jetta Ichimore, the Kiruchigo Mare, Elu, Nima, Goyu, or Saja, Takanga, she can get in Yamlenang, this Tigio, Dama Shuguyore, not Toshana.
So Jé Rinpoché himself, Lama Tsongkhapa himself, was actually a fully enlightened being. He was actually Manjushri, and yet, during his life, he engaged in all of these practices of listening, reflecting, and meditating. And he was really quite an exceptional person. And there are many stories about him that show how exceptional he was. And he composed this text of the three principal aspects of the path, mainly for that disciple, the Tsakungaon Drapa, and he taught it out of affection for him, but not just for him, but for all beings. And it's even though it was composed by Lama Tsongkhapa, it's not uniquely a Gelugpa practice. It's something which practitioners of all the traditions seek out the transmission of and teachings on, and who they all practice this teaching. No.
Motoshana. That di Tucson. That di Shusani. So Consajango Chimpone Sar Mambo did the stop song. Only Tagananshi, Shandata, Lama Shindane, the Toyore, what did the top song? That the language over the Duduce, Tindere, Chazan, Hautengi, any game, Kinsunum, Uyen Sadin Shuaja again, Uyen Sanagi, Zinji Magic D, and Yamishas, this torture, Direcana Suchazan, a Chibuchi did to do somebody who sing you, the danger, there's some dance. What did it? At the Chachu, what did it change? What the Tosa did that Mambo the top of it, that's as on the Lamatiki, Chilak 10 day or Tangama, Jetani Chamadama, Gun, Chilak 10 day or what did it say that didn't to smash should be? Do my daughter, Jabache should be in a Tavako or a Shirayorba. A Chanjus and Goshen Shira, Takaka, Mangorba, in a Koran,
No. So that finishes the explanation. This is a teaching that I've received many times from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and not only from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but many other teachers. In particular, I received it from Khenso Rinpoche, Rinpoche. So he particularly told me, this is something you must practice. So this is something that I practice every day, recite and think about every day. And so I've only given a brief explanation because like even the view, if I was to explain that in great detail, then there's a huge amount that can be said, and likewise with the bodhicitta. So anyway, I've received these blessings, and I'm sure there are blessings that are transmitted through this explanation because of having received it from these incredible beings, and these are really blessings that come down to us right from Jé Rinpoché, Lama Tsongkhapa himself. No. No, Massimo Corona.
Massimo Corona.
No, la Corona, no.
Shinda de Chalena ta mangu yugere cheza ani kera tinani ta jidan mangbo de chu jimba tinang ge yusare de sonza ani tuji cheche mongba yine ani yarge khumbe tinde yoya ge myona shwa yi changme mara naro na shache.
So this teaching was mainly requested by the Xinjiang Zhichu Center. And so mainly the teaching was organized by Massimo Corona, and of course many others were involved in putting it on. And these are all people that are Dharma practitioners. So this is really excellent, and I shall also from my side pray for the center to continually develop, and I also request you all to make that prayer. No.
Motice. Ta di ini Xinjiang Zhichu pige zo pige karata pige zo pige zo nang da ta boss ne da ini second censure dem chen re sha ani 제가 second censure dem chen 군대 망고네 비게 가르선다 비게 가르선 템바던 비게 다때 템베토다 짜청보나니 기부 탐법에 시부들아 망고 주는 마 군대 치대 중요해 대중으로 하던 게 단다디 군대디 공디 고사 장고 첨벌이야 아니 배 믹스에 아니 비게 딱 지가서 오래다 망고치 봐 최저도네 오늘은 망고 싶어 어디서 표제 고사 장고 첨벌 어디서 네 디디시레 제정 센터멘다 문에 타내게 왔다 기중인데 근데 저 자신분하니 오다 디디시레 요래 디디레 제장 대단 제장 공기 단단지 제제 개참밖에 저를 단단히 콘주 커둘이야 쉬비스 쉬비인스도 단단히 이지미지 엔디 대한 샵된서 남선 쉬고 주는 데이터스 마티난 대체 띵해져서 항상 원에 타내게 책도 된다 항상 해야 돼. 디디시가 삼게 디디시지 막 가좀 나샤 디디시지 제자다 콩 삼기 미겨 군군군의 레디 단다 디콩 좀 신시를 묻체 삼기 미겨 원에 타내게 오다 간다 디디시래 아니 간다 다 연습을 묻체 공인의 병원에 타내게 어느 놈이 간가나 어떤 캐버도 두바 어떤 드리베 드리요니 캐중이리 어떤 거네 드리 기부 탐버치 어디래 제가 안에 꾸지 단다이네 공다 제가 경계여라 꾸지 봐 윤도 쉬어야다 투신 제가 가리는 땐도 설명면배 동면 나로나 chen 정말 쉬야 돼. tosana.
So the anyway, the chief in the center, the one who's really like takes care of the center, is second Senja Rinpoche. So he is somebody who for many lifetimes has upheld and taken care of the teachings. He's really an amazing being, and especially his immediate predecessor had a very special connection with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, gave him many empowerments, transmissions, and pith instructions. He was a great scholar, wonderful scholar, and also a very great practitioner. He was practitioner of the Mahamudra, and really amazing being, all very amazing being. And in fact, there was one time when I gather that the Genjampa Gyatso, he requested the previous Second Rinpoche to compose a text, which he did immediately, and I've seen that, and it's really quite an amazing text. So then the present reincarnation of that second Senja Rinpoche is also somebody who's studied widely, studied everything that he needs to study, and is himself also a great scholar and a great practitioner. And so let's all pray for his long life and for success in all that he does. No.
我这是他今天学起来呀，你没什么空给，他没什么个人学了，我空给阿玛拉开始下不了，我不做下，开始了吧？但是，对呢，对，而且开始蛮多的，你是他看到广播做下，你送上学了呀，你他看到可能就。 아마라당 다도 권한주 비가 요래 루게시 콘도 때들이 요래 다도 맞으면 콘시 다 콘도 원에 타내기 땜바도 거리 첨부 시다래 아니 거리 첨부래 학동기 아니 아마라 디체비는 다미 학동 길로벌 배 거리 첨부래 단다 이게 아니 뿜어야 쳐줘대 권한주의 수도가 배 단다 그래 학동기 내 태양이야 스트레치 랍다 티견스 잡을 사바시네. 다 스트레치가 랍다티네. 루루 망고 타네. 배등은 진짜 중요해. 진짜 중요해. 지나 레디 티체가요. 막 루종 약고 싫어하시지. 어디든지 오코나스 디스나 디나므레 티조조다 아마라와 아마라가 코니 부니 요래. 다시 나 그런 게 싫어라 신매. 어디든지 제가 거리 첨부 싫어래. 내 샤장 디 손장 가서 이게 가다 깨봐도 야가지네야다 다 취사돼. 이내야 아니 나도 인지 미지기 통외나야다. 많이 청고치 신념도 숨으로나 쉬어. 그렇잖아.
Then specifically Massimo, his mother died the other day, so very recently, and so I would like us, for the sake I would like us to pray for his mother and for him, Massimo, also for his brother Luca, and so they've all been very kind to the teachings, especially to the Buddhist teachings, especially his mother was very kind to the Gelug tradition. I particularly, one things I heard is that the Lama Tsongkhapa Institute in Pomaya was offered by his mother, and also she built the Serje school, which is really a very, very good school. At the moment it has it goes up to the 12th standard, and it's not just that it has all those classes, but the instruction is very, very good quality. So she's been very kind in so many ways, and so please pray for her, and with that in mind, with her in mind, please recite one mala of Om Mani Padme Hum together. So because of the kind of person she is, she'll be okay. But anyway, you know, it would be good to recite a mala of Om Mani Padme Hum for her. No.
Oh, doing my window about Om Mani Padme Kewandi do Jé Servono Rujun Bawa Chicken Malu Sala Fodovara Show Otto Chana Ale Tat Tanda Tuzu Testo Gala Tanda
Will together? No.
Tanda Buddha Sum Suji Still Sumji Tamba Sumji Tuzu Yes, you said it. This one's a country should be led or Tuba. Tuba, you know, country. No.
Yes. So it seems that we still have some time. So actually, if there are some questions, maybe I can take some questions, if there are any.
Oh, yes. Tuba came
Massimo.
Massimo will be yesterday.
Lesser.
No. Massimo, did you say you had a question? Yes, Marwala.
Yes, Marta, Naranzo, Tandati, Chu Changin Cheva, that cannot deal with the Sayo, any concert jungle chimber, that number Zing, Dinzi Kibuzo, concert jungle chimber, Kuzipa, you of the Nevata, Tushi Karini, Chishinduba, Tindeta, Tumenayana, Taganashi, Dinzi Kibu Kana Sushu, Kota Sundashine, Kuziba Tembata, Tushin Zeba, Dendro Solamembe, Tumenaro Nas, Shua Chiche. Then in Yabadi, any Naranzo Zambulin Delia, and Big Hasore. Oh, Takanda to shoot Modu, Tata Yeshima, Tikeva, Mutupa, Shiak, Tumenaro, Tikation Borisha, Modu, Satipe, Terekang Chimbo, or the me some motivation, Swesha, Modu, Atagana Shin Nayam, Mugi, or the Tizutama Ganga, Pa Shiak, Tumenam. So, any good of what did it now on us?
Please pray for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who is really the most important being for all of us, for all sentient beings, the main upholder of the Buddha's teachings. So please pray for his long life and for all of his wishes to be actualized exactly as he wishes them to. And not only that, but for all those who are upholding the Buddha's teachings to have a long life, and for all of their wishes to be fulfilled precisely. And besides that, in this world at the moment, there is so much war going on. So let's pray for those wars to come to an end and for there to be peace. These wars, they're so terrible. So let's pray for that. And they're all created by the mind. It's terrible, really. But so let's pray for that, and then also pray for an end to all of the epidemics, and the other illnesses in the world, and also for for an end to the famine and droughts in the world. No.
못하잖아. 어다 간다. 아니 타입의 심지 탐지 교려야 참바다 잡아 딱 간다. 참바 잡아 양탁 왜 따와. 비게 되게 유튜브에 동문 딱 개시슈 알리 현단 점링 현단 지든 현단 맞추는 거랑 전부링 될래야. 어다 참바도 제베 퐁돼요. 양탁 왜 따와마도 퐁돼요. 뭐 세상 되게 교려. 참바다 잡아 양탁 왜 따와. 그런 거랑 좀 되게 송야. 어다 되게 파 게임 유튜브 게 내시 게임에 애는 간다 핀주 참지 쳐봐. 어다 딘데지기 동면나로나 간다 되게 좀 볼린데 시디 쳐봐. 딘데시 동면나로나 샤이. 그렇잖아.
And then let's pray especially for all sentient beings, and for sure in this world, because what we need is the loving kindness and compassion and the view, realizing emptiness. So let's pray for all sentient beings to have that, and especially you can see in this world there's it's really quite scarce, and so we need more of that in the world. And let's pray also that everybody, all sentient beings, and especially the sentient beings in this world, live together with mutual affection for each other and live together in peace.
Oh yeah, 다가라.
No.
나도 지난주 아니 네 다리 이게 도나나 아니 주주든 베토나나 디데스테 오 가보충 제자 아니 상마 공감 대단다 한 투시 신주에 면함 쉬어이.
So I really appreciate, and I'm very happy that you've shown such great interest this weekend, taking time out to attend these teachings. So I'm very happy with that, and I would also like to pray for everything to go well for you as well. Yeah. No. Please recite together.
Chanju Senjo Rinpoche Mage Banam Gegyu Gewa Nyamba Mewa Yang Kone Kondo Pewara So Yangda Dawa Rinpoche Mage Banam Gegyu Gewa Nyamba Mewa Yang Kone Kondo Pewara So Pama Semje Tamje Dedan Dingyuji Ngendro Tamje Dado Tongwa Chanju Senba Kangla Sushu Deda Gwengi Meolam Dogyuru Je Oh yeah, that's a himita. I think I didn't say.
Oh, Sai Poge Jo Meto Tra Gururatnam Mandala Khaniya Tayami Pame Yonte Kyatso Tasone Tave Dova Kunge Gogyopa Kya Gewa Gyatso Zajeda Tsehe Lajo Nange Shebazo Toba Chimbo Jede Tambejo Bebe Tine Lundro Chogeje Tebe Kyatse Lasam Pondoge Tenge Pede Lama Shatesho Donda Gyudev Deba Jozoku Toza Gombe Jawata Sunde Rola Nola Sanda Gepe Dedo Tembe Pedo Yondesho Lume Gyage Jedan Chanyeche Daja Dedo Mupedo Tonge Mumbe Dongo Hishin Rupala Baje Gege Zeme Mize Shoage Wadi Nyododa Lama Sangye Drogyone Roa Chigya Malapa Deye Sala Gopare Jogare Rawe Korwe Shingane Pendan Dewa Malu Joane Chere Ziwan Tenzing Yatsoye Shabde Sita Bado Thank you Reche Daso Jinya Sabe Gewari Tendan Roa Kula Kapenda Yepa Jesu Losandra Pai Tembe Nyembore Dose Sesho Nyembo Dele Tendele Nyeme Koya Dele Shi Nyeme Tato Dele Pa Konjo Sunge Trashisho
Tujiche, Kadinche, Tuche, Kadinche.
Chena Kadinche Rinpoche
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Nyurdu Cheyong
Jé Rinpoché, Nazo Kyopo Jeyang, Kyopo Jeyang, Kyopo
Oh,
Jeyang,
Jé
Jé Rinpoché. Jé Rinpoché.
Oh,
Jé Rinpoché.
Kadinche.
Jé Rinpoché.
Rinpoche.
Grazie.
Good night, Rinpoche.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Grazie Rinpoche, grazie, ciao, grazie.
Rinpoche.
Thank you
Thank you
once
very
more,
much.
Corona.
Venerable Steve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rinpoche.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Venerable Steve.
Thank you for the translation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen.
Everyone, thank
Thank
you.
you, Steve. Yes,
Unbelievable.
thank you.
Hola, caballos. Campestre.